All right. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever you are. What's up? You guys hear me fine? Can you give me like a quick thumbs up? Just want to make sure everything is good. Hello, hello, hello. Anyone in the house? Hello. What's up, everybody? What's up? What's up? Anyone there? Does anyone hear me? I got microphone here. Uh, oh, oh, yes. I wasn't auto scrolling, so basically everybody was replying and I couldn't see the replies. Anyway, all right, so back at the bottom here. Good morning, good morning. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another class here at Lava. I recognize some names. I'm stoked that a lot of you came back for another round. A lot of people are joining for the first time, and some of you are a huge fan of the work. So flattered to be here with you all, and we're going to dive into some fun stuff today. And hopefully for the next 4 weeks, right? I want to put a couple of disclaimers out. This is going to be an interesting and somewhat challenging. Basically, I want to challenge you on the matter of the head sculpting, right? I'm kind of bringing different concepts, different ideas here, and the goal of this class for us is to study it together. So I want to show you how I approach not only modeling the head and sculpting the head and presenting everything that I value when I'm sculpting a head, but also how I approach sculpting and how I have been going throughout the years, learning how to study myself and continuing on this journey that hopefully will never end. So studying something, and that's why I call this class study, because it's really about studying and getting better and improving. This is not about building a production ready head, although it is part of what I'm going to be showing here, but differently from our past workshop where we built something from scratch, we put in the engine, we went through the whole pipeline. Today is a little bit more on the conceptual, on the sculptural ideas, and again, going back to the study. So I put it together a little presentation here, just kind of quick introduction on the concepts that we're going to be talking about. So the approach and the philosophy of a study. So this is something that we're going to discuss throughout the class. And I want all of us here during these 4 weeks and beyond, to feel free to try different things and to kind of get rid of this idea of always seeking on always producing something that it's worth sharing or producing something that is better and beautiful and all of that, right? Like obviously we want to strive for getting better, we want to strive for doing like cool stuff, but we also want to be able to allow ourselves to freely explore and try different things, try different brushes, try different methods, try different approaches. What I think for beginners this may not be very clear, but once you get to a certain level that you are used to doing something that looks, good and appealing and all of that, it is very hard to just try something new because you get frustrated very quickly. So you try something else that you are not used to, and then you produce bad results. So this is kind of speaking on my own journey on going to oil painting, right? So now I'm kind of getting stuff that looks okay. It's starting to feel like there's something there, but maybe like the first 2-3 years of me in this journey of painting, I was just producing things that were not visually appealing. And I had to let go of all of these ideas that I'm always producing something worth sharing, because I was so used to kind of doing 3D, doing traditional sculpture and all of that, and kind of getting good results kind of quickly, right? Anyway, so that's kind of what we're going to be doing, going about. We're going to do stuff here that may not look very appealing at first, and we're going to be okay with it, right? I want you to keep it loose and keep it fun and kind of engage in the process of studying. We're going to explore and go beyond maybe conceptual ideas that are presented, especially in the 3D world. I'm going to be presenting things here that might be novelty for some of you. Hopefully not at all, but I'm pretty sure a lot of you haven't heard about some of the things that we're going to be discussing, because I haven't heard of those before until I got out of the 3D space, right? We're going to talk a lot about different exercises. I want to find a good balance between stuff that it's easy and stuff that it's hard. And I learned this through my journey into the sports, doing triathlon, running, and kind of more on the competition side of things, where we have easy days of training and we have hard days of training. And making a balance between the two is what gives you the most amount of improvement. Always striking to be kind of beating ourselves and doing only very hard things burns ourselves out very quickly, and you don't have the energy to keep going. So that's why most of you, I would imagine, and including myself, jumped into things when we get excited and I'm gonna be really good at this, I'm gonna do this and that, and then you do it for maybe like 2-3 weeks or maybe a month and two, and then suddenly you lose the motivation, and then you burn out, and then you give up, right? So how can we continuously push ourselves throughout the years? Because this is going to be a long journey, and I think it's balancing things that feel easy, that feels fun, and then maybe sprinkling a little bit of like very hard exercises, very hard things in there, and then developing those and getting better, and then doing more the easy stuff that feels fun, that feel that it's nice and it's okay, and then doing more the hard stuff. All of that. Overall development, it's the idea that we want to develop ourselves a little bit beyond just sculpting heads, right? Like, this is about a head and a human head. We're going to be talking about that as our subject matter, but I want you to take this class more than just the head itself. I think it's more about the approach of becoming an artist. Sorry, my bad. Just go back. Schools of thought. So this is going to be our main topic today. We're going to be going through a couple different ideas on how to approach the sculpting and drawing and developing and designing. Mainly the two different school of thoughts here are the construction, or sometimes called conceptual, versus the optical, which is more of like sort of like line of sight or a planar visual approach. We're going to be discussing a lot of different tools that, again, I put out in some of my YouTube videos, but discussing calligraphy, design, expressions, and emotion, flow, contrast. So it's a little bit more than just let's sculpt the skull and let's look at the shape of the zygomatic arch and the bone and the glabella, all of that stuff, that it's very important, but there are like so many classes out there about all of those things, right? And we're going to be talking about those too, but don't get me wrong, I think there is much more than just anatomy. A couple abstractions that I built throughout the preparing of this class. So the agenda here, just so we are all aware, we're going to be going over, and there might be some changes here. We're going to kind of play by ear, but basically just a quick introduction right now. We're going to go into this theory, schools of thought. We're going to today talk about proportions, some general guidelines, discuss a little bit of abstractions, planes, and we're going to do a couple like gestural, free flow, loose strokes, brush economy, sort of like different exercises and sketches. Day 2, we're going to look at the skull and kind of build a skull from scratch and discuss the main points of the anatomy that I think are very relevant. We're going to look at construction modeling. So I'm going to do a demo using more of the construction approach. Then we're going to go into a more optical modeling, which is a little bit more on the optical sort of approach. And then we're going to do another exercise. So day 2 is going to be packed. Another exercise just kind of flowing between those two approaches, which is kind of what I tend to do these days. Day 3, we're going to discuss a little bit about shape language. And we're going to do like an exercise pushing shape and form. Again, like merging those two concepts together and kind of really going out there. Probably a more stylized, something a little bit more like less realistic. So gives us more room to push shape and form. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about calligraphy. I'm going to go back to the calligraphy here in a bit. Day 4, we're going to be doing something a little bit more complex. So it's going to be a whole day just kind of working on a single piece. So probably more refinement, more nuanced into the thing. So we're going to be refining forms, shapes, construction, and polish, and all of that. I'm going to share, some of you already seen this, but this is a tool that I've been using lately. I think it's called Pomodoro technique, whatever. So this is something that, so I was taking this class the end of the last year at Grand Central Atelier in New York. It's a painting workshop. Anyway, so we had a live model, right? Like someone posing for us. And we sat, I think it was like 25 minutes or something like that. And we had to pause every 25 minutes, right? Like for the model to get a break. And every time I came back, I had like very fresh eyes. So I was like, man, this is something that I've never done on a computer. So maybe I should start doing that on the computer too. Or even when I'm just painting out of references. So I got this little clock. It's just like I think I shared this the other day, but it's just like a little clock that you can just kind of turn, and then you get different timers based on the position that it's at. So like this is going to be like a 30 minutes. If I turn, it's going to be a 10 minutes. 60 minutes, like an hour, right? So this is something I'm going to be using just to kind of guide myself in the class, but I truly recommend you finding moments to pause and to kind of refresh your eyes, because there are diminishing returns sometimes that you get so fixated with something that you're trying to resolve, and then things are just get kind of spiraling into it just gets worse and worse. Just a quick caveat before we go into a pure ref board that I built. The idea of calligraphy here, so let me just kind of see if I have any references here that I can share. Okay, so let me just kind of, so hopefully you see this. Let me just close this. All right, cool. So the idea of calligraphy, I'm going to just use a couple different ideas here, right? So you look at this Velázquez painting, for example. You don't see a lot of the brush strokes here, right? So the actual calligraphy here, which it means like the shape of the brush strokes and all of that, might not be very obvious. You do see it sometimes here and there, but when you go to more like looser paintings, like Sargent, for example, the brush marks are also part of the painting, right? So then you look at a Frazetta painting or drawing, for example, it's very apparent, like all of the brush marks. So this is something that we're going to be discussing, and it's more relevant when we are doing sketches or more sculptural type of models. I don't think this is as relevant as when we are doing finished production models, right? Because we're going to be throwing a lot of pores and a lot of details, and the part of the calligraphy doesn't become as relevant because we don't have that much to play with, right? Like we are really trying to mimic reality. But the more stylized, the more gestural, the more loose your models are, the more tools you have at your disposal to make interesting models, interesting pictures, and all of that, right? All right, cool. So hopefully that makes sense. We're going to be exploring that as we go on. So I want to talk a little bit about, I might be giving little pauses here and there just to kind of see if everybody's okay or any questions. Usually we reserve the last 30 minutes for like questions. So I just pause everything that I'm doing and we just kind of go on questions in general. But if you have something very specific to what I'm talking about, feel free to throw in the chat too. And I'm going to be jumping back and forth between what I'm talking about and the chat, right? Okay, cool. So the main two schools of thought are the following. One is a construction school, which I kind of have it illustrated here. The idea here, this is very easy to describe with drawing and painting. That's why I'm using that as a subject matter. Obviously, we are sculpting, but it's still very relevant because the school of thought here is how we observe and how we approach our visual decomposition of what we're seeing, right? So it's more of like a conceptual, mental, philosophical idea. And the reason why I think it's not very discussed in the sculpting world is because it might not be very obvious when you are sculpting. And I also think because a lot of laziness in the traditional training, in the modern training, I should say, which I think we are slowly losing a little bit of the more artistic um, methodologies or approaches just because of the technology, and I see on newer students the lack of finesse and understanding of like very crucial components and conceptual ideas. Anyways, so before, sorry for the little rant. Anyway, so the idea here is construction. Let's look at our reference. Our reference is this skull here, right? So instead of analyzing what we see and looking at the shapes of what we see from a visual optical perspective, we're going to reconstruct. So Glenn Vilpul, which is a very famous illustrator and I guess draftsman and teacher, he tends to say the phrase, look at what you see and reconstruct what you see. Don't copy what you see. So that speaks very fondly from this approach of, I'm going to look at this reference and I'm going to reconstruct it, right? What that means is that it creates you a 3D form in your head that you can reconstruct and draw from any angle. Because once you understand that in your head, you are able to just turn it and you can visualize that in 3D. And then you can put that on the paper, you can put that in clay, you can put that in ZBrush, because you have a solid understanding of that 3D image. So that's like a Loomis approach here to a construction model, where we understand the forms of the skull, and then we turn that in 3D space, and we have construction methods like starting with a sphere and kind of putting this sort of half rectangular shape attached to the sphere, right? So this is a very construction approach. And this is great because it allows people, even from the Michelangelo era, to just kind of do a lot of things from imagination. I just want to make this, is this kind of clear, like the idea of the construction? We are trying to recreate what we see, right? So you see these like Marvel animators or like Disney animators, right? Like you are basically imagining everything, right? And you are this is a very classical approach that most animators, 2D animators, character designers, I don't know, many different sort of like imaginative drawing has to come from a construction point of view, right? Because we are constructing things and without, even when we have reference, right? Like you are looking at the reference and you are reconstructing that. It gives you a lot of freedom to just kind of do everything in 3D. This tends to be a much more heavily anatomy-based sort of approach. So if I understand anatomy and if I understand all of the components of the skull and I understand construction, I can create this skull in any shape and form, in any form, like in any space. And this translates very well to sculpture, because once you are looking at clay, for example, let's say I'm looking at the skull, I'm only seeing a picture of the skull in one angle, right? But if I understand all of the nuances and the shapes of the skull, I can just model that in 3D. I can model that with clay. So this might be very, very good for all of us when we are sculpting. The opposite of that, which is the other side of the spectrum, is a visual optical approach. So the optical comes from flattening everything we see in the world into our retina, right, into the shape of your eyes. And we don't know what we are looking at. We are just looking at shapes. We are just looking at lines, at patterns. And as you can see here, the combination of all of those patterns and those shapes, we recognize as a skull, but they don't have any meaning in 3D space, right? Like if I were to turn this, there is no correlation to how this is actually constructed. I'm kind of really pushing the extremes on both sides of the spectrum just to make this very clear, right? So hopefully that makes a lot of sense. We're going to be discussing these two different things. I just want to make sure like this is clear for everybody. Like when we say construction or conceptual, we are talking about conceptualizing form. This tends to be a more form, kind of creative, imagination type of approach. And when we say about optical, we are talking about more shapes, more flat, more 2D based illustration. I guess we can use, it's a different language, right? Like it's a visual language that they are obviously all intertwined, right? Like it's we can't really separate, because at the end of the day, even when we look at skull constructed in 3D, the final thing we look at is just the 2D, right? Like even when we look at our own eyes, we are perceiving nature through the lenses of our eyes. But like I said, these are very important on how we approach the subject, because each one of these tools will give us something different. All right, cool. So let's look at a couple different tools and methodologies throughout the years that were developed. Obviously, there's much more here. There's a guy called Vanderpoel, and like a book that it's pretty old. I actually have it here on my The Human Figure by John H. Vanderpoel. So this is a book released in 1918 something. I don't have the number right now in front of me, but basically he described the creation of the skull into very simple planes. And I really love this approach, and we're going to understand why. So this is what we call abstraction of the shape of the face, and into very simple forms. So basically what he's doing here is just saying like all of the heads, all of the faces have a combination of these planes. So you can use this as a guideline to guide you whenever you are in doubt, or whenever you need to simplify the head, or we need to simplify the face, right? So a couple of examples here. Dan Thompson is someone that I really enjoy his drawings and his artwork, and he's super into the Vanderpoel model. We have different models too. Riley method was very famous, I guess, popularized by Jeffrey Watts with the Watts Atelier, and by Westermo. And you're gonna see a lot of people talking about this if you Google. It's another sort of abstraction, a little bit more of a linear abstraction, full of curves and full of intertwined lines and flows and correlations between the entire head. So this is a sort of like a diagram or a map, so you can actually navigate the human head. You also have John Asaro, which built famously the planes of the head, of planes of the face, which I also have somewhere here on the back. I recommend you having something like this in your desk, because it's very good to look at and kind of to touch and to feel and to kind of remember, not only if you're painting, but obviously if you're sculpting too. There are many other planes of the face diagrams that people built all over the years, all the way through, the beginnings of the art back in the multiple centuries ago. I think the most famous approach, or the most famous diagram, is the Loomis, Andrew Loomis. He wrote a bunch of books. He was an American illustrator, and he has what's called the Loomis method, I guess, which, it's very, very famous, starts with a sphere, and then, you have all of that. He brings in different set of proportions that we're going to be looking at, and I find very easy to follow, which is just dividing the head in thirds. And I like the very simplistic approach of the proportions here. This was not, the proportions divided in thirds is not a creation of Loomis. This is something that has been described throughout the years, throughout history. And I think Loomis really brings and innovated with the whole sphere approach and kind of the construction in 3D space and all of that. We also go into Russian Academy, which tends to be my favorite approach of all of them, which is a combination of everything. So I did not study in St. Petersburg. I'm not Russian, right? So, but I took a couple classes with Russian artists, and I have a couple Russian books. And throughout my studies, this tends to be the approach that kind of speaks closely to my own personal journey. So they do a combination of everything that we are talking about here. So they do they start with an optical idea, then we go into some masses, and then eventually they go into construction. So at one point, they go into a more conceptual idea, conceptualizing form, conceptualizing perspective, 3D, and all of that. And I think it gives you a combination of both worlds. And I think this is great because you get the best out of both worlds, in my opinion. So what are the drawbacks of this approach here? So whenever you're trying to do something that it's very accurate or very likeness based, the optical idea will get you much closer because you're going to be mimicking and copying exactly what you see. The downside for that, it's that, you're kind of copying what you see, and if you don't have anything to copy from, or if you're trying to invent, or if you're trying to stylize, or if you're trying to go beyond what you see, then you kind of fall flat. So then you need to have a better understanding of what actually trying to build, conceptualizing that in 3D, basically in 3D, in 3 dimensions, so you know how to push and how to move form. So that's why I think each one of these things have the best utilizations of them. But I think for me, I like having a concise understanding of both and kind of merging everything together. I used to believe that anatomy is the answer of all problems when I started, because that's how I got introduced to arts like 20 years ago. And I spent a lot of time studying anatomy, and I still do. I still think anatomy is a key component of what we do, especially with more figurative artwork. But I do not believe it is the true answer for everything. I like to use anatomy as another tool in my toolbox to solve problems and to give me correct understanding of what I'm seeing. But I put more emphasis on different things like flow and dynamic movement and simplification and gesture and all of those other things. All right, let's look at a couple of examples of some of these approaches in practice. So Velázquez, although I mentioned you don't have a lot of brush marks, he used to combine and compress a lot of the informations he saw into shapes. So this idea of shape, and every time we talk about shape, these shapes, this and that, like what do that actually means, right? Like, so he is simplifying what he's seeing into shape. So if you look at the actual eyes here, there's like a very clear shape and a very clear combination of all of this visual information. So he is taking the visual information and compressing that into shapes, and the combination of those shapes creates the illusion of form. A couple examples here. Sargent, master of that, right? Like he simplified everything he saw into very precise brush strokes and defining very clear and distinct shapes. So beautiful work here, obviously. We go into more classical American illustration, Dean Cornwell, Leyendecker. We are talking about like the polar extreme of like shape design and beautiful shape, very bold and very precise and so confident, right? Like getting like some of these angles here, and if you look at like some of these things, they don't have any specific meaning. They are just like very random shapes, but the combination of those random shapes, and because they are so bold, they give you the full spectrum of what a head looks like. And I think we can learn a lot from this. And then you get into, Rockwell was a little bit after Leyendecker. They were actually friends and whatnot, but Rockwell takes a little bit more of a, kind of starts introducing a little bit more form. So he takes more of the approach of like the shape and then introduces a little bit more form, starts rounding things a little bit more. Funny enough, Leyendecker studied in the French Academy in a more classical approach. So he actually took a lot of both worlds, and then he went more into this idea of like shape. We have other artists that I really enjoy from the 19th century. So this is Solomon J. Solomon, which I also think he does a beautiful combination of both. So you see how flashy things feel and how things when are in light, they are very described. And there is a lot of form-oriented modeling here. But then you go into the shadows, there's a lot of simplification of like very clear, distinct shapes. And this is one of my favorite artists. You can also see how much emphasis he's putting into dynamic and flow and movement and all of these more visual ideas. Madrazo, another one, like beautiful. Look at the like, some of like these shapes here, and it's still giving a very illusion of form and all of that. So that's awesome. We go into like sculptors like Bernini, for example, which, love. You can see how he's conceptualizing everything. And what I mean by that is he's idealizing all of these forms, right? So all of the anatomy here is very idealized, is very constructed. So he definitely used references for all of these pieces here, and he was looking at humans and all of that, and probably did like thousands of studies and clay sketches and draw like 2D sketches and all of that. We don't know exactly, but when we look at the actual resolution of what he was trying to build, or what he ended up building, is a very idealized version of a woman, of a man, of the hair. So it's a very conceptualized approach. And he didn't lean too much into shape design and anything like that. You can see that everything is much more round and much more contained and much more realistic, or kind of, I guess, idealized again. When you go to someone like Carpeau, for example, which was also much later, right? Like we're talking about like 1900 here. So Carpeau, you can actually see that he has this sort of combination that you see on Solomon, and they are somewhat close, not too far apart, and they follow a same school of thought here, where you can see, and if you see this in person, this is just like masterful. It's beautiful. There is a lot of like shape ideas here and a very designish approach to his models, but at the same time, you still get a sense of flash and the sense of the sense of form is very present. But at the same time, this feels like a person. This doesn't feel like an idealized version of a woman. This feels like someone he was actually looking at. So it's a better translation of reality. And when you look at a piece like this, which is just masterful, it's just beautiful, you can see like he's picking out things to idealize and to conceptualize. At the same time, he's capturing the full likeness, right? So he's being very precise in certain areas. In other areas, like the hair, for example, he's just like, okay, let's just flow these shapes. Let's just kind of use this brush strokes, quote unquote, brush strokes. So he's navigating everything. But when you go into the nose has a beautiful shape. It's very model. When you look at the beard, the mustache, it's just kind of, okay, I really want to make a statement here, a bold statement on some of these things, right? So hopefully everything that I'm discussing here kind of makes sense, because this is, again, a very philosophical ideas and approaches to the sculpting. And we're going to put all of this in practice. I just wanted to give you all a little bit of a background and an understanding of how we're going to approach whenever I'm sculpting, and I say some of these things, hopefully it makes more sense. Conceptual, idealized, and optical realistic. We shouldn't say this, because we look at Leyendecker, and this is very shape-based, but it is still idealized, but it's not very conceptual in the sense of construction. So I don't think we can simplify in those very simple terms, Mikita, sorry. Anyways, let's just jump into ZBrush, and we're going to be discussing all of these concepts. They are not, black and white as well. They kind of merge. If you guys know who Ramon Hurtado is, I took a couple classes with him, became a friend, love his guy. And he has a very good, he has very good insights on his website on these two schools. You should read it if you are interested more into diving deeper into construction versus optical and 19th century and all of that. Cool. All right. So I also included here, and I'm gonna give you these. I'm gonna upload this puref file so you can all have it. I also included some very basic simplification stuff that I built a couple years ago, so you can also reference here. We're gonna do a couple of these studies right now, just so I can explain some of these concepts. But before, I want to talk a little bit about a couple guidelines that we want to follow. And for those of you who might be a little bit lost, this is going to help you out. Let me just save this, move this out of the way. Okay, so like I said, there are many ways that we can be idealizing the head and picking out different proportions and methods. And I like to keep things very simple. Michelangelo said in one of his biographies, I didn't measure anything, and if he looked off, if he felt off or looked off, it was because it was wrong. Otherwise, it was correct. And although I would like to believe that that is the correct answer for all of us, I think he was overly trivializing proportions, because at one point, we don't know what is right or wrong. And sometimes we need tools to be able to guide us whenever we feel something is rough, but we don't know what it is, right? So let me just kind of walk you through basic proportions. So I like to use brow line to nose to chin. So these are thirds, and then we're going to have another third here, which is usually hairline. Keep this one in mind. So we basically divide the head in 1, 2, 3 thirds and something extra. This something extra sometimes is bigger, sometimes it's smaller because of hair shapes and all of that. And again, when I talk shapes, I'm actually looking at the shape, right? Like the shape that the hair will fill. So this is what I'm going to be referring to. From the side view, I like to think about nose, brow, and the relation to the ears. So the ear will start at the brow, like the head is tilted back a little bit, right? So if I were to just kind of do this like a box here, the head is a little bit tilted. So if we were to kind of position like forward this like straight line, you can actually see like brow to ear. So that's the main one that we're going to be looking at. Besides this, from the side view, roughly the head can be divided into segments here, and the jawline usually starts right at the middle, and our ears are pointing at an angle here at the back. This is like, what angle is this? We can give numbers to all of these things. I like to just kind of keep it loose, to be honest. I don't think it's necessary. There is also this idea that the eyes are at the halfway point between the top of the head and the bottom of the chin. Again, I'm not a huge fan of this one because it can give you wrong references, because it's so prone to like the tilt of the head. Because if this head is tilting up, like the mass will, whenever you are analyzing reference, right? So this will be true in 3D space, right? Again, on the conceptual approach, where we idealizing form, you are imagining in your head everything in 3D. But when you are looking at a reference, this might not be true because of the perspective. So some of these things don't translate very well depending on the perspective. So I like to just kind of ignore those. Some other things that I'm going to be looking at, and this is more on the abstraction. So I want to look into corners of the eyes, relationship to the corner of the nose. So this is a triangle that I think it's very important for us whenever we are trying to compare things between, maybe we are building a likeness, or maybe we want to stylize and we want to push things forward. So I want to look at this triangle here, and I want to look at this triangle here. And when I say about this triangle, I'm saying like, what is the relationship between the chin to the nose and the mouth fitting in between this triangle, right? I'm not going to be drawing triangles when I'm sculpting. I'm not doing any of that, but it's about the relationships. Another relationships that we can look at is just the mouth to the actual corners of the eyes. So you can see like this whatever, this form here. I can't talk today. And I think from the corner of the eyes, this is a very good relationship to look at for as well, right? This one. Another one that it's pretty cool to use, and I guess this kind of goes a little bit into the right and rhythms, or even just plaintiffs of the head, is from the tip of the ear to the chin. So you have some sort of like a curve here that we can be building. And this is helpful if we want to separate the more planar part of the face to the side. Obviously, I'm drawing on something that is already realistic here. So what is the point of drawing if we are not painting? But we're going to see that this becomes very relevant whenever we are start to sculpt and we want to be able to judge when the forms are turning in 3D. Another one that I like to use is more of the Vanderpool, which is this sort of like line here. So we go from here to the corner of the mouth, creating, well, actually it's a little bit higher here to like the 2/3 of the mouth here. So this idea that now we are separating the top plane here to the side plane. And then we can also go to the chin, and this actually separates and finds another point here. When we talk about the jaw, I think it's important to understand that the widest point of the jaw in the front view, which is this point here, it's not here. This is here what we are seeing. So because of the masseter, which is this muscle here on the side, this tends to create volume on the sides of the jaw. And my corner of the jaw is here, but if I keep my finger in the front view, you can see like my finger, you can see in the camera, you can see my finger is all the way back. So there is volume, there is like overlap in this volume. So if I put my finger here, what am I seeing? I'm seeing the corner of the masseter here, which is roughly where this muscle connects here. And look, I'm talking about anatomy, right? So the anatomy will guide and help us justify the things that we see and understand what we see. So again, anatomy is important. I'm not trivializing anatomy, but it's not the ultimate answer for everything. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make. So another one that I think it's cool to look is that from here to here, it's not a single straight line. We're gonna have another angle. So we have like the front of the chin. Instead of going all the way directly to the end here, we actually have a breaking plane here, and then we have another one. So we have these sort of like 3 planes in the face that are turning back. And you can actually see in my head here, I have like this plane here in the front. And if I put a line here, we also see this plane here, and then we have this back plane here, right? From the front, this is kind of facing forward, this is facing sideways, and this is facing back. So this is also very relevant. People tend to just kind of divide these in 2, and this is all flat, and you can be a good simplification to start with, but then you lose all of these volumes, and your faces become very flat and without a lot of structure from the front and 3/4 view. So hopefully that all makes sense. If we go to any of these, let me just get this Asaro head. Hold on. So if we look at the Asaro head, he starts with a very simple simplification here, as we just talked about, but there is a little bit of a curvature. And then we have the side plane here. And at this point, there is already a breakup here, but he's not explaining this breakup, although the shape is not flat. You can actually see there is a curvature here. Once he goes into the 3/4 view here, the more complex planes, I should say, now you start to see, okay, now there's a break in the skull here. And actually, if you look at the skull shape, there's actually like a breakup here too in the actual skull. And then you get to see the volumes here of the masseter, right? In this simplification, you can actually see he has this sharp line suggesting that the largest point is right over here, but it's usually here once we have a full fleshed out muscle. And the corner of the jaw is right here below this point here. So that's a reason why you're going to see lots of different simplifications on the skull and on the head, because each person tends to value different things whenever they are sculpting or when they are modeling. And that creates style, that creates different takes because ultimately we're not just mimicking reality, we are absorbing reality and putting our own twist into it. And the more into you go into stylized ideas, right, like the more it becomes reality, the more apparent it also it shows through. But even if we are doing portrait, for example, even if you are doing very realistic characters, um, I believe this is also very important in order to convey emotion, to convey believability, to convey the expression, to really understand and get a sense of what the character is going through. It's passing on to you. All right, cool. So let me just kind of go through the chat. Okay, Ramon. Who should we use all of these proportions when sculpting, or are we choosing specific ones? No, so technically all of these proportions will work. There are proportions like explanations of proportions that are like now you do like fifths. So you divide this. What is that one? Oh no, I think it's here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So you kind of divide the head in fifths. So yeah, I think it's here. Yeah, here. So corner. So it's five eye sort of like distances. So you can see like this works too. So there are like multiple explanations. So technically all of them should work, but some of them are very cumbersome, in my opinion. But it might be a good way for you if you that again, like that's another point. Like some people like these, some people don't like those. If you look at Da Vinci description of the proportions of the whole body, there are like multiple idealizations of these proportions too. Some of them might be a little bit pushed to the stylization or idealization of the ideal form should look like. Some of them will give you more freedom to kind of push and pull things. Because I like to navigate between both worlds, this idea of looking into simple things like this triangle, for example, there is no measurement here, right? Like, what is this triangle? Like, if this triangle was like this, how can I know this is right or wrong? It doesn't matter for me. Like, what I'm looking at is the relationship between this triangle to this triangle. So I'm kind of comparing things. And when I want to push and pull and stylize, maybe I make this triangle like very short, and then I make this triangle very big. So I'm subdividing the head into different components so I can push and pull and kind of find contrast between these shapes. And we're going to talk a lot about that in the next couple classes. All right, cool. Good. This is kind of an existential question that isn't relevant, but I always wonder how the human head form ended so proportional. Yes. Yeah, maybe it's very, I don't think I'm educated enough to get into that discussion, but cool. All right, so let's just jump into ZBrush. This is something super cool I wanted to show with you as well. If you're ever trying to kind of gauge the orientation of a head or something in the reference, besides camera angles and all of that, this is more kind of trying to get an understanding of perspective and positioning. So I built this little head. This is like the ZBrush, whatever head. And then I put a cube in there. And whenever I'm looking at certain references, I might place this into an angle just to kind of understand where things are positioned. And then if you turn on transparency, and if I go into this mode, I'm just gonna get like a different material. You can actually see that now it's giving you where the block of the head would look like or would be. And what I discovered is you've just created like a little mask here. You can actually now see all of these lines, and you can actually see the line of like the jaw, the brown line into the ear line. And then you can actually have all of these connections, right? Like even if you want to kind of just draw or paint in perspective, or again, use this to help you analyze your reference. So you can put this on a corner, take a screenshot, copy that to the reference. It just gives you more tools to kind of understand and visualize everything. Anyway, there's nothing special here. It's just like the head. I just kind of line up, the ear to the brow and all of that. Cool. All right, so this is the warm-up file that I gave you. You should have all of the warm-ups that I did throughout the preparing of this class. You can actually see some of these have very different type of brush strokes. Some of these are very smooth. Some of these are very harsh. Some of these have like stroke marks, that van der Pol simplification. This is what I'm calling my simplification. Obviously, it's not very finished, but this is a combination of van der Pol, planes of the head, some other abstractions, kind of trying to put together my own version of what I value. So that's something that I want to finalize eventually. I just built here for the class as an exercise and just to kind of discuss throughout the days. You know, more things kind of simplifying and emphasizing certain parts of the head and making things more subdued in different areas. So I'm basically choosing, this is more, you know, let's just push form, stylize, and get some of that calligraphy, because again, we are playing with something that is very sketchy. I can actually throw a bunch of marks. Some of these marks represents maybe wrinkles. Some of these marks just helps the eye flow between the forms. Some of you who watched my video, I saw you guys discussing on Discord the other day about brush marking and just going with the flow and kind of using that. So I tend to use a lot of that too when I'm sketching. You know, another one, just kind of playing with overlaps and stuff like that. Something a little bit more stylized and just kind of playing like the big and small. I actually think now, looking at this with fresh eyes, it might be cool if we just kind of exaggerated this a little bit further. So maybe something more like this. Let's just kind of mask this out here. You know, maybe more like this. So just kind of really playing with this idea of like small triangle, big triangle here at the bottom, right? Stuff like that. Cool. So I also saw a couple questions on how I build form, and I want to kind of go over building some forms with you here. And we're going to go after into sculpting and sketching a couple heads. Okay. So a couple different thoughts, and I want to get this out of the way so we understand in my approach here. I'm going to be using clay build up, and I'm going to be using them standard. I'm going to use clay, and I'm going to use Ryan Kingsley rake brush. Sometimes I use this rake brush, sometimes I don't use, sometimes I use more clay brush, sometimes I use more to move, less move, and all of that. But let's say if I want to build form, and I want this form to be very subtle, I might be doing this, and I'm gonna smooth, and now I can continue building form and kind of going across the form, and I'm really kind of making it softer and softer and softer as I go, and I'm kind of rounding out these forms. So you can see like I'm smoothing it out. Let's say I want to kind of build something here, I can smooth that. So that's one way, right? Like, and I can kind of come in here, maybe create a little transition here. Now I'm going with the standard, and now I'm gonna cover it up with the clay. So this is getting a little bit too soft overall. So let's say we want to kind of find some areas to pinch things here, and I'm kind of going over with the clay. And again, this is just about finding control over everything that I'm doing. Now the smooth is getting a little bit softer because I don't want to lose the small transitions between everything. Now I can make my brush a little bit smaller too and kind of continue building form and going against the form, across the form, and trying to subdivide these forms into more forms. So this is one way of approaching it, right? Like using the smooth and really cleaning things up like this. And, you know, like now I want to kind of push that overlap here. So, I mean, with the dem standard, I'm just going to kind of go over here. Now with the standard, I'm kind of adding a little bit of like a rivet there. And I'm, again, like building form and kind of smoothing it out. And I don't know, let's just kind of use that as a pinch. And really thinking about these transitions here. Thinking about the transition, I want this transition to be soft or sharp. So that's one way, right? Like, so that's kind of one way of building form that I do depending on the type of and style of what I'm doing. The other way, I might be a little bit more aggressive. So I might be, let's just do something similar. So I might, just kind of sketchy it out. I'm not going to be smoothing because I really want to leave my brush marks. And I don't care too much. I'm just kind of going over a lot more painterly approach. So I'm going to build something like this. Let's see, I want to have like this gesture here. So I might just kind of throw that gesture and use the edge of my brush stroke just to kind of emphasize that. I may come in here and maybe just add another brush stroke here, and I maybe add another brush mark there. So I may come in here and do something more like this. And this is kind of more my like these days sort of like vibe. And then I may, get the crease here, push that crease, and kind of just find a couple areas. You can see like this is actually much faster. Obviously, it gives a different feel. It gives a different result. A third way of building something like this, and obviously we can refine this more, right? But I guess this is kind of a more direct approach. And I find this a little bit more fun. But like, for example, like all of those anatomy studies that I've built, that book that I wrote a couple years ago, they were all sculpted like this because I really wanted clean descriptive forms. And this doesn't give me clean descriptive form. This gives fun brush marking and fun forms, but it might not be the only formation here that we see is form. I'm also using brush marking to make an interesting, appealing image. And that's sort of like combination between line and form and shape and all of that, right? Like those ideas that we talked about. So that's kind of what I like doing, and I like exploring things more like this. The third way would be a combination of both. So I may do something like this. So let's just kind of build it out like this again. This might be a little bit too much, but let's just kind of do those shapes that we built here. We have like that. We have this. And I guess I want to, get things a little bit clearer because this might be a little bit too sketchy and too loose. And depending on the area of the face and the type of model that you're doing, for example, if you're doing like a beautiful, very soft lines, like female, for example, very soft lines, very nice flow, having all of these harsh brush marks can actually get in the way of the contrast that you're trying to build and the flow and the rhythm. So you might either smooth this out here, or what I like to do is actually use this this rake brush, sorry. And with the rake brush, it's very similar to how I would sculpt in real life in clay. I'm going to use these rake marks just to kind of break up form. I'm just going to get an extra subdivision here so it becomes a little bit more apparent. So I'm going to go across the form and against the form. And what that is actually doing, it's smoothing it out just because of the interlocking of these lines. And I go soft and I go clean, I go soft and I go, strong. I'm gonna maybe make this a little bit smaller, and then I can start breaking it up a little bit more. And I can use this to also help me with the energy and the flow of these forms. So here, for example, it's gonna give you, although there are like much more marks, it's gonna give you like a cleaner flow because now the forms are all merged together. And there's a little bit of a taste involved here, right? Like how much you want to do this, how much you want to do that. But these are just things that I think are very cool for you to play with. And again, there are many other brushes and techniques and approaches. But I really like how some of these things feel sometimes. Depending on the subject matter, I really love how soft it feels, how sketchy it feels, and how clean it feels, right? So again, it gives these different sort of like properties that you can pick and choose and maybe do a combination of them. But hopefully you can see like how I use this like rake brush and why I use that, right? It's just very different. I'm refining form, and let me just put it here. I'm refining form, but I'm not just adding like random marks. I'm actually cleaning up the surface. And cleaning up the surface, but still giving me direction. And that witch that I built, some of you posted on Discord, I did a whole model like this because I really wanted to kind of clean up each one of those forms without using the smooth, because it helps me to really think about the interlocking and kind of the juxtaposition of the forms and the overlaps. And once I was satisfied, I just kind of smoothed it out a little bit and then started adding like pores and fine details and wrinkles and all of that. So that can be used. Any one of these can be used however you like. All right, cool. So these are the 3 different ways that I tend to work. Obviously, sometimes a combination of them. We're probably gonna be going over all of these things. The DEM standard, it's very good because when it's very big, and I learned this from my buddy Gio, which you probably all know, Gio Nakpio. If you do this very big, you can actually see how that is actually pushing large forms, and can be very useful just to kind of sketch and things out, because it's not just giving like clean lines. And if you want to just get like lines, you can just make this very small and you get lines. I do find this very harsh though, so I tend to just kind of go a little bit smaller, and then whenever I want to like just kind of clean up some like larger forms like this, it's just kind of pinching a little bit, so you can see like a little crease created. And then whenever I want to get like a more painterly, sort of like sharp, contrasty areas, I go a little bit more, a little bit stronger, and just kind of pick a couple of different areas just to kind of find. So now you see like sharp, a little bit softer, and sharp again. And this distribution of selectively picking out areas is going to be very important throughout the journey. It might be a lot of very clear concepts for those who paint and those to draw, but I'm pretty sure a lot of you who are just training under digital sculpting methods might be very new to these ideas of finding contrasty areas and kind of selectively adding sharpness, or whatever we call like lost edges or loose edges, and soft and harsh control. A lot of these concepts are not very easily explained in 3D. But hopefully I'm here to help you out with all of that. Okay, cool. So hopefully 3 different ways of building form. Let's get that out of the way. What gives you gradient on the box? Yeah, those were the edge loops of the box. So basically each one of those were getting highlighted. Any good ways to train your eyes to see forms and shapes better? Thinking more of an optical approach. I think it's really good to just try to simplify what you see, and simplifying what you see will make you selectively pick what is the most important. And doing exercises like trying to model, sculpt, or draw ahead using the least amount of information possible, we're going to do something like that pretty soon today. It's going to be very important for that. It's a mask, yeah. Yes, nice balance. Right on, Leticia. Cool. All right. So I thought about just using as a reference something like this. We're not going to do a likeness or anything like that, but I want to just kind of model something like this with you. Let's just do one of those sketches that I did, those warm-up sketches. And today we don't need to be pretentious, and I want to go back to that idea of a study. Let's get rid of that damn pressure. Let's be playful, and let's try to just have some fun today, okay? Maybe next week we're going to be very harsh on some of these matching exercises, but for today, I want us to be able to feel free. It doesn't matter if it's going to look or bad. What matters the most today is the mileage, is the experimentation with this different tool, with these different ideas, all right? All right, let's get this out of the way and let's just get going, because I'm anxious to get some sculpting here. Enough of bless. And I tend to be very direct. For those of you who have been taking classes, my classes are, let's just get going, do stuff, and do more stuff. All right, cool. So I'm gonna just load this again, just for the sake of loading. getting like a clean sphere. Again, this thing here doesn't matter, right? Like this is just like a sphere, but it's just in the same size as everything else. So I'm going to start with that. But honestly, there's nothing here. It's just like a blob. I want you to start with a blob. I don't want you to start with the planes of the head that the ZBrush ships with, or starting with a scan or anything like that. It totally defeats the purpose of the class. Again, it's not about hacks on making a realistic head as fast as possible. This is about studying and getting better and playing. We also going to talk about intentionality with our brush strokes. Last thing I promise that I want to get out of the way before we actually start sculpting. I do not want you, let's just separate things for a minute. Whenever you are in production working at the studio, I don't care what you do, right? If you should probably do whatever gets you the most result as fast as possible, right? That's putting everything into practice, into action. Now, at least in this class, and whenever we are studying, I'm not going to undervalue or undermine whatever you do at production, but I would like to challenge you to approach things in a similar way that I'm going to be providing here. So if I want to match the shape of this head, I would like you to kind of really think about what you're doing rather than doing this. Like move brush too. And then you're going to be moving. And most people, I'm not going to call names. And again, there's nothing wrong with this. Nothing wrong. You do whatever you want. You do you. But please, today in this class, let's not do this, right? Let's not do move madness. And then, oh, okay, maybe this is kind of getting there. Okay, more here, more there. Oh, it's almost close, and then like brainless moving stuff around until it randomly gets where you want it to be. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. People do that, and people are professionals and do amazing stuff with that. So I'm not undermining that type of approach, but it just goes against what I'm trying to teach here, right? So if you want to work that way, that's fine. Do it. Also, there's nothing wrong with using the move tool. I'm going to be using the move tool. But I just want you to be thoughtful about what you're doing. So let's just get started. With that idea of conceptual and optical, what I like to do here, I want to get a sense of the whole. So I'm going to be leaning towards a little bit more on the optical. So I want to look at these relationships here. I'm going to try to capture these shapes. So look at this, what we call envelope. And going back to that Russian academy, or to the more, illustration sort of approach, kind of optical illusion, whatever you name it, I'm just going to try to capture the essence of everything here. And because this guy has like a hair and a beard, it might be throwing off all of our proportions. So what do we do here? We're going to get there. That's why I picked this one. All right, so I'm going to go lower subdivision here just for the sake of allowing myself to move freely. And I'm going to be a little bit thoughtful of what I'm doing. So let's try to kind of capture like this shape of the head here. So I'm going to put this head in somewhat of like a 3/4 view. So kind of trying to feel it out. This is the hair. This is going to be our chin roughly, right? So this is the moment where, okay, where do I know the chin is here? Okay, because I can split these in thirds and it gives me those proportions and those points. So can I just rely entirely on the shape? Maybe not. Can I just ignore anatomy? Maybe not, because I don't see these in 3D, right? So I need to be also constructing this. So that, again, navigating both worlds. So, all right. So, but I'm really mostly focused. My head is mostly focused on the shape and the overall essence of this character. So I'm going to try to kind of capture the mass, the big mass here. Okay. So this is kind of roughly some good proportions. Let's look at the shape of this beard. I want to get this a little bit thicker. and a little bit more volume. I don't know a lot of what's happening here, so let me just kind of add some mass here just to kind of keep this rounder and simpler. I don't know where the jaw ends as well, and I don't see the mass of the back of the head. So what I'm gonna do here, and gotta use a little bit of imagination, I'm just gonna add a little bit of volume here. So how does this feel? Does it capture roughly the shape? I think we can actually pull these edges a little bit more in just to kind of really highlight the shape of the beard out. So, and again, there is not a lot of things here to play with, so we don't know if this is correct or not yet. So the more information we have on the model, the easier will be for us to judge what we are building. But the reason why I'm not putting eyes and nose and just kind of moving stuff around is because I want to force myself and force you to try to see what we see and distill into what's most important. So this is an exercise. This is not the fastest way to get to this. This is an exercise. All right. I think we are getting close to that shape. Let's just look at these. I'm just going to get rid of these lines. Let's just look at these sort of like curvature of the head. Obviously, we don't see a lot of that here, so we kind of need to invent. I think I'm going to just kind of push this out. So the nose is going to be most likely here. I'm going to push this mouth out, and I'm going to try to create some sort of like nice rhythm here because the beard, like looking from the profile, so we have the hair here. I want to see if we can create some sort of like rhythm here. This rhythm is going to be pushing this way, but I'm going to break this rhythm with the beard. So thinking more of a composition sort of approach from the profile. So my beard will kind of block it out coming out here. Okay. So again, using all of these different ideas, conceptual ideas, and all of that. I need to kind of get my ears in because the ears is a good landmark for us to play with. And I'm going to just create a little mask. I'm just going to pull these ears out roughly around here. Adding the ears, let me just change my focal shift to 80. Adding the ears will start to give us rotation and direction and proportions, right? So if we look from the side, we talked about the ear. It's roughly on the second half in the middle, and I think my ears are a little bit too much sneaking in into the front. So I'm just going to move this down, and this is pretty low resolution. I'm just going to Dynamesh all of this. Let me just kind of increase the Dynamesh resolution a little bit more. Okay. All right. Everybody following so far? Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to make the craziest sketch. Yes, go, Amanda, go. It's beautiful. Cool. What are the rhythm of the head? So it's just some sort of like correlation of all of these things, right? Like, so I'm thinking about this sort of like mask rhythm here. Some people will have, some faces will have a more angular shape like this. Some people will have a more like shape like this into the face. It's just another abstraction and trying to kind of simplify what we see. Let's just kind of look at a different head here, for example. Yeah, you can see like some of these rhythms here are kind of going this way. This is more like on a gestural sort of approach. Some of these heads here are kind of very triangular. This is, let's see, again, this is a good one too. You see like this breakup here, and this is getting complemented by the shape of the hair, right? It's like kind of very like the forehead is like really poking through, and then you have like this kind of break, and then you have another shape, and then you have like this very triangular shape. So basically lots of rounds and lots of lines and straight. So that creates a lot of contrast between the hair and the face because the face is very round and all of the hair silhouette is very straight. And this is a deliberate choice. Like he was translating what he saw and making conscious choices. Same with here with on the human figure class, we talked a lot about contrast, and you can actually see like flash and straights, just to kind of get that different idea of materials and different sort of like of movements. Same here, like you look at the contrast and how harsh hair is and how flash feels soft, and the type of wrinkles he adds on the flash are very different from the harsh lines he adds on the hair. Cool. All right, let's just get back. Where is my Solomon piece? All right, cool. So this is good. This is moving okay. Let's start now kind of defining some of these planes. So I'm going to roughly guess that my forehead will be roughly here. And I'm going to kind of, throw a mark here. I'm going to push this out a little bit, get a little bit of like a plane. Let's just kind of get rid of this so we can like pull the nose out. And again, you see that I'm moving very slowly and I'm kind of being very deliberate with what I'm doing. I'm not going on move craziness. So I'm looking at what I'm seeing and I'm reacting, and I'm looking at what I'm seeing and I'm thinking about what my next stroke will be like. So, okay. So I see, remember like some of those planes that we talked about, we can use the van der Pol here and get that sort of like distinctive shapes. That's when some of these abstractions will help us. So we can see that we have a shape here for the zygomatic going towards around the mouth. And then if I go to the side here, we can actually see the separation between the jaw, the plane on the side, this other plane here, and then we're gonna have like the chin here at the bottom. So just throwing some marks there. I'm not kind of committing to anything like that. But like I said, the more stuff we have, the better it is and the easier it is for us to kind of work with. I want to build the solid plane here on the side. So I'm going to put a couple marks here. And let me just go back because I want to explain this. I already have a volume here and I want to connect this edge here, the side plane. So if I go across like this, I'm going to be adding more here than here. So I'm going to add a little bit more strokes here, but I also want to connect things. So this idea of connecting shapes is very important. We don't want to be working here and then here and then here. We want to find rhythms connecting across the head as much as we can, not only for correlation of things, but also for a more natural look. So I want to find rhythms that go here, rhythms that go there. And then because we are more sketchy and loose, we can kind of keep things very soft. So I'm gonna, add this eye cavity here, trying to get like this whole region. That's when studying the skull helps, because I want to be able to kind of find specific landmarks for us. I'm not gonna go too crazy and like sculpt like a real skull here. We could, right? Like we're gonna do one of these exercises another day. But that's when doing all of these type of things really helps. All right, so I'm gonna block out this nose, beautiful, long, strong nose. So let's just kind of get this out. So I like to just kind of get a little bit of a mask, and then I'm gonna just pull this out. I'm gonna make sure my proportions are right. I think it's a little bit higher. I'm just gonna pull this out, and remember from the profile view that we talked about, pushing this out and kind of that silhouette, I really want to kind of play with that idea of that rhythm, right? Like that side rhythm. So if I look from the side, you can actually see this is coming in. I really want to get that silhouette feeling like it's this way. And we just talked about that, and I think my head could come back here just to kind of help emphasize this. Now the nose feels completely disconnected from the face, and that's fine because we don't have all of these other volumes. So this is my chin, and so my mouth volume, my muzzle shape will be roughly around here. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of a mass, right? Adding a little bit of a mass here, and I'm gonna start adding a little bit more volume here for the zygomatic, so we can actually connect that to the face with that plane, okay? All right, everything good so far? Let's see. Are we gonna go slower? We are going to lose dynamic of the sculpt. You are not supposed to follow along. I guess you're supposed to do whatever you want. Like you can follow along or not, but I think ideally it's probably better. I would recommend just kind of watching and taking notes, and then you can obviously rewatch the recording after and do it together, follow along, and do however you want. But I think it's good practice to just kind of take notes at least. I like writing on all of the classes that I take, and I usually take like 3, 4, 5 different classes every year, and I'm always writing and taking notes. And sometimes I never read the notes back, but it's just a matter of me kind of really trying to put into conscious thoughts what I'm observing. So that's my recommendation for you all. All right, so let's kind of clean it up, add a little bit more shapes here, make this a little bit wider. I don't like how square my head is looking from the front, so I think he has a very short sort of like head and shape here. So let's just kind of fix that. So let's just kind of make this a little bit smaller and a little bit rounder, which is going to help breaking all of this beard. You can see now the beard is actually starting to take shape, and we haven't touched that in a while because we are kind of working around the beard. Let's just kind of judge our proportions a little bit, and I think we got some stuff that is a little bit off. So if we look like the thirds, 1, 2, 3, this might not be too bad. I think just the nose is feeling a little bit too high. So it's okay. Let's just Dynamesh everything and continue working. So I want to block out my lips, and for the lips, we don't see a lot, so I just want to find some lines here. So I'm just going to throw a couple lines. Let me just get this back a little bit stronger. So I just want to kind of find some lines, find some corners, just kind of throwing a line there, and then use that to gauge and to help us. I think this is the right place. Another way to look is that from the center of the eye to the corner of the mouth, there is a relationship there. So, this relationship is here. And I think our sockets are roughly in the right spot. Okay. So I want to work a little bit on the nose and this transition here because this is feeling pretty weird. Looking from the bottom, and if we look at the skull, the muzzle protrudes out because the whole skull actually pushes this. And because we talked about that idea that I want to emphasize here with that break, I think I'm really going to push this. In fact, I'm going to rotate my head a little bit more like this. Okay, so that makes things a little bit easier for us to look at. Okay? All right, so my reference is a mess, and this is something that I actually recommend, not making a mess, but actually drawing on top of your reference and kind of putting your thoughts together. That's something that I personally do a lot, and I would recommend. So let's look at some other abstract shapes. Like, what is this sort of like triangle that we see here? I don't know, but it really makes, well, I know, but if you don't know, like, it really makes a very key component of this character because it separates this lower part here and also this whole section of the eye, right? Like there's like a big space there. So understanding that relationship that we talked about and how long that is compared to this one, I think it's important. So I want to make sure this feels very long. It does feel very long. And we do have this breakup here. So we don't have like a clear nasolabial fold here, which we will see in some other cases. We actually have like a breaking planes here. So let's just get that. I don't know exactly if that is correct, but let me just kind of throw, with a couple loose strokes, a breaking plane there. Okay? So I'm just kind of throwing that in there. And again, this is fun. Once you get to this point, this becomes very fun. It's almost like painting in oils that you're just kind of pushing strokes and it's like, okay, there you go. Is this correct? Who cares? Let's go to the next one. And I tend to find this like super fun to work this way. I see a shape in here. Do you see like that breakup in here, separating the nose from the eyes? And for some reason, when I look at my model, I think this is merging things too much. So I'm just going to add a brush stroke here and separate things out. And I'm going to add like a negative here just to kind of pull this corner in a little bit more. So I'm going to pull this in a little bit more. See? So let's just kind of construct this nose a little bit more. So now I'm going to be a little bit more precise and thinking about more of the construction, because some of these shapes are just very hard to kind of illustrate in simple brush strokes. But I still want to get that sort of like simplification here. And I'm going to sculpt a little bit of like this, pull this in, pull this back. And some of this is actually from studying the nose and kind of understanding the anatomy and all of that. But ultimately, just thinking about how we can simplify this nose. All right, so we got a nose. We have, that's why I said, hey, let's just do some exercises, prepare for the class, so we don't get here and don't understand what the components of a nose looks like. But at least we can get very quickly cool simplification of the nose. Does it look identical like that? No, but that's fine. We're not doing like a full likeness. We just want to get the essence of what we're seeing. Our glabella, or our transition, our T shape, triangular shape here, it's very abrupt. So I'm just going to add a little bit more clay here. And I'm also going to suggest some of these volumes kind of going this way. And again, using some of that crisscross hatching sort of thing that we talked about. Can I also break some of these planes here? Let's just kind of break it up here. Okay. So you can see like now things are starting to take shape and starting to get there. For the eyes, I really want to be careful with sculpting the eyes right away. Most people digitally, including myself, depending on what we're doing, right? What are we going to do? We're going to insert a sphere here, and we're going to model the eyelids on top of the sphere. And again, that's great. I've done that like a million times, and that's all good. But again, for this class specifically, I would like for us to be a little bit more loose on thinking about the eyes. And I want us to think more about the shapes and forms rather than the actual starting with eyelids. I want us to think about form, and doing this way will force you to work the intersections of the eye rather than being very literal with the actual eye lines. So what we're going to do here, I want to get a movement of the eye, and I see a movement here and a small movement here. So I'm going to just add that movement here and a small movement here. So I'm trying to kind of be very precise with my brush strokes. Does that translate to what I'm seeing? No, but I felt a movement there and I threw a movement here. How am I feeling these movements? It's a matter of like practicing and trying and analyzing people's work and trying things out. And being this idea of brush economy, I think it's very, 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 very important. And it's so not talked about in 3D. And again, I'm just going to add a little bit more volume here. And when I look from the back, this is very flat. And I want to make sure this is a little bit round. So I'm going to use my move tool and just kind of add a little bit more movement there. So now it feels a little bit round and starting to get the impression of this person, right? Does that look like a likeness? No. Does that resemble what we're seeing? Potentially. It's missing the beard, it's missing all of the other elements, the hair and all of that. But it does start to feel like a head, which, you know, it's the goal of what we're doing. Let's continue. So let's look at the proportions of the eyes and the shapes. I think we might be a little bit too tight in, so we can use the move brush and just kind of move this out a little bit. But that's fine. That makes it a little bit more organic and natural. Maybe my eyes are a little bit too big, so let's just look at these corners. And I think I want to put the corners right here. And again, looking at that triangle here, we want to make sure we see something like this. So I want to make sure my eyes are finishing here, my finishing here. So I'm just throwing a couple dots there just to kind of help me with that understanding. Let me just save this so we don't lose. So day one, and I will upload this for you guys after too. All right, cool. So can we maybe block out this hair? I think it's going to be cool if block out the hair. To block out the hair, I'm just going to try to find these straight lines, and then we see the distance here. So we are probably something roughly around here. And I'm going to try to just throw some of these lines here. The actual hairline is roughly around here, and then these are just kind of loose hairs that are kind of coming from the front. So our hair is kind of pulled back. So let's just kind of throw a couple strokes here and just kind of blob it out, whatever. It's just kind of getting some of those shapes. Again, let's make this a little bit less square. And because it's a little bit too simplistic, I want to just kind of go a little bit smaller and get some of these curvatures here, right? So it actually feels like the hair is doing something there. So let's just get like maybe this, and maybe this, and we can get here something like this, right? So that's good. And you can see that it's not very refined, whatever, and then I just kind of keep it loose. Okay. All right. So let's look at these planes of the head. And again, I like the planar description of Van der Poel, which he has a line here and a line there. So if we look back here, we're going to see these lines here. These lines here, right? So depending on the angle, he actually changed some of that direction. So we have this line coming here and then this line coming here. And I think it's good because it creates like a little triangle here that we can work with. So you can throw those lines in there and just to kind of help you with solidifying some of these planes. And I'm just gonna get rid of some of these lines. Oh, oops. No. How do I get these lines here now? Okay, there you go. Love PureRef, but sometimes kind of gets in the way. All right, cool. Let's just now block out this beard. And again, I want to see there is a volume here. So this is volume, and then big volumes, right? And that's big part of this character. So let's block out volume here. So I'm going to go across the form here just to kind of give me volume, just to make things a little bit easier. So we got volume here. You can see it kind of goes over the lips a little bit. We're going to go on those details after. The lips are pushed in a little bit more, so I'm just kind of pushing that in. We got a little bit of a, I don't know how that's called. Technically, it's called, got a little bit of facial hair there. Thinking about movement, and then we're going to go forward now, and I want to use big brush strokes here just to kind of get a lot of volume here. Forward. And we are kind of getting there. So a lot of volume, and I'm going to use some of these kind of more loose brush strokes, and we're going to change the size of our brush just to kind of get more smaller information after, but just kind of blocking it out like this. And we're going to analyze the shape after. So if we go from the back, from the side, you can actually see that we are starting to get that movement that we talked about, like going in and then out with the beard. And I think we can actually emphasize that. And the smaller we go with our strokes, the more precise and the more contrast between the shapes we can get. So if I want to really break things out here, it's going to be very hard to do with a bigger brush. But if I go with smaller brush, we might be able to get like sharper turns. Same here, right? Like once we start getting into the flesh areas, it might be very hard to just use like big brushes. It might be kind of just destroying everything. So if we look from the profile here, I think this plane, we're still missing this plane. So I'm just going to throw a brush stroke there, kind of bring that plane back. And you can actually see now it starts to feel pretty organic. So corners of the mouth, as we did in some other exercises, and hopefully you did, you can actually see the corners of the mouth kind of, they pull in like these corners here, they kind of wrap inside. So that's the direction where we imagine they're going, right? So we're not being literal and like really pulling in, but I want to make sure they are kind of coming in. Actually, at least imagine that they are doing that. So let's just kind of get our lower lips here, just an indication of their lower lips. Some of these forms here are kind of getting a little bit lost, so I'm just gonna add a little bit of volume to the lower lips by carving that in here a little bit and just kind of getting those short hairs coming out here. Okay, so looking at the distance here, I think mine is a little bit too short, so I'm just gonna increase a little bit of the distance, and now we can actually start getting some of these curls in the beard. I think this volume here, it's a little bit bigger too, so let's just kind of get a little bit more, and we may need to start adding a little bit more resolution to our mesh just to be able to capture more detail. Obviously, working with symmetry, we can also do this exercise without symmetry and be very loose and bold with our strokes, and that's also good. This is pretty bad, like this part here, so let's just address that. Based on studies that we're going to do, and you probably have done already, we know that the skull ends at this line here, so that's where the base of the skull is at. We have a part of the cranium here called mastoid, and this is where the sternum cladomastoid, which is the muscle on the neck here that connects from on the sternum to the mastoid, it's at, and this is like a really good landmark for us to kind of look at the head from different angles. So if we look from on this place here, this is where the mastoid is at, and this is where the base of the cranium is at. So you can actually see the breakup here. So basically, I'm going to carve out this triangular shape here and then kind of build some sort of like neck, because what we have here doesn't make any sense, right? And I also want to highlight the beard from this view, right? Okay, something like this. And I guess we can just stop here. We don't need to really sculpt the neck for today. Let's just focus on a head. Okay, so looking from the side, I think my skull, it's kind of missing a little bit of form. Let's just kind of massage things a little bit here and there. Okay, this is coming along. Cool. Let's go back to our beautiful Solomon, J. Solomon, which is the name of the painter painting, portrait. It's very tempting to just kind of try to get the full likeness here, but I'm gonna abstract from that and just continue working. The only thing that I'm doing here is just looking at relationships. So like my eyes are feeling still very big, and it's giving like a more stylized, cartoonish look to my head. And I think my mouth is also very big. So I'm just gonna make sure it feels a little bit smaller. We wanna get this nose, but I don't want the nose to feel like way too big as well. And let's just now look at some construction points here to make sure we are in line. And just go to the chat real quick. Yes, agree. Yeah, a couple brush strokes can really define forms. That is absolutely true. All right, so I'm gonna, add a little bit more volume for the beard here, and like this line here, this line really separates the beard from the zygomatic, which also gives more fullness to the face, which helps a ton. So let's just kind of block out this ear as well. We don't want to be forgetting about ears. Ears is a very important part of the face, is another important feature. I'm using kind of the inflate here just to kind of help me out with some of that very thin edges that I have. And for the ear, I want to make sure I have a tilt in the ear, and we don't need to do a likeness of that ear. So I'm just gonna kind of get some of those shapes here. Let's just get the other side, get this volume here in the middle, and add a little bit more volume here. Let's just kind of get the ilics and the anti-ilics and all of those cool stuff. And if you watch my my video on YouTube on modeling the ear, you're gonna see me doing just like a full ear and kind of the simplification and all of that. We can go over some of here as well, but honestly, there's not a ton else that I can be talking about. I also don't want this to turn into ear anatomy, because I'm probably not the best one to be going over that. I don't think I have the expertise or the authority to really kind of tell you everything about anatomy of the ear. But I think I can sculpt a ear or two and kind of get some of these shapes looking cool. All right, so this feels good. Just kind of looking from the front and kind of looking at overlapping. It's pretty simplistic. It's very generic still. It's not really capturing that whole ear from our model, but that's fine. I think it's fine for now. So I want to give a 2-minute pause because I need to refresh my eyes, and I already see, just by saying that I'm going to pause, I already see things here that could be improved to get the personality, right? Like, I'm not trying to copy like one-to-one. I want to get the personality, and I want to try to describe what I really liked about this piece, rather than just copying one-to-one. Let's just do like a 2-minute pause. I'm not going to go anywhere, but if you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to get some water too. So the thing between doing this from painting and from photos, I think the paintings will already have some sort of stylization or some sort of translation, and it will be easier to capture that translation, right? Like Solomon already abstracted from the model he was looking at, and he picked up the things that he felt most necessary for this painting. And he's probably overemphasizing and kind of subduing other things too already in the painting. So I find a little bit easier to do some of these studies from masters, because they are already doing some of the work for me. And then I just need to kind of extrapolate that or learn from that, right? But from photos, you're going to be doing everything by yourself. So I think it's a different type of exercise, but it's definitely helpful as well, especially if you work with scans. I think the scans will teach you how the head is actually at on every single level, so on every single angle. I would recommend purchasing a couple of scans, having them side by side. ZBrush that has that split view now too, and I think those could be probably very good just to kind of help you understand how it feels. I always talk about this in my classes, but having clay sculpture practice is, I believe, crucial for everything that wants to develop sculpting skills, regardless if it's digital or not. So getting some clay and trying it out, it's very tactile. It gives you a good sense of how things turn. But having just maquettes and clay sculptures in your office and being able to rub your fingers on top and kind of feel the change of form, change the planes, I think it's very, very important. Like I said, you can actually look at a head like this and you can actually feel this is turning. I think this is pretty cool. It's just that feeling that I talked about, right? And it's very good, very helpful to have stuff like this or finish sculptures, support your local artists and get some busts, clay, head sketches, whatever it is, right? Like, I think it's cool to collect art from other artists as well. I don't know how that truly translates to fully digital, maybe buying STLs, I don't know. But looking at finished pieces from other artists, and that's something that is very awesome to whenever you are at a studio. You can actually open people's files and see how they resolved form. And you can actually go and kind of look at the model themselves and see like, oh, how does this person actually did this? And you can actually try to kind of replicate and copy things here and there. I used to do that a lot, like when I was sculpting a ton at work. opening other people's work and just kind of seeing how they did things and trying to learn from like, hey, there's like a really cool detail here. Can I copy that full detail? And then I'll try to copy on the side. I think it's just good practice. There is so much that we can learn from other people. That's why I'm always taking classes and all of that, because I want to learn from as many people as possible. All right, cool. So fresh eyes. Oh, sorry. There's a bunch of questions. I don't know why my thing is like not uh, staying to the bottom. So my bad. I'm just gonna go. Would your approach differ drastically if you did this in clay? Definitely no. Especially because in clay you can't really use the move brush, right? Like you can still move and kind of push things out, but you can do big changes. So I would be even more conscious about the choices that I'm making. To be honest, back when I did most of my clay sculptures, I would sculpt a very generic head first. So I had a very uh, construction approach to all of my pieces. So I didn't note too much. I got into this whole two schools of thought maybe like 10 years ago. But back in the day, I would mainly just kind of sculpt a very generic face and try to get the shapes there and then add the hair, add the beard, all of that, and hoping that it would just kind of get me super close. But the more I learn these days, I think I would do something very similar to this, but maybe not as aggressive with the shape of the beard because it would be just very hard to kind of retract. So maybe indicating certain things. So like a little bit of like a hybrid approach. Getting an essence of some parts of the head, like let's say nose and the model first, would help making likeness for sure. Yeah, should I be more deliberate from the start when doing portrait? Also, what is personality? I think personality is a combination of all of the shapes and the features and how they combine into our face. If you really think about that, all of humans, well, 99% of humans have two eyes, a nose, and a mouth and an ear. And if we really think from far away, we all look the same. So the differences between me and you and each one of us are very, very minor compared to the big picture, which is a skull, ears, eyes, eyebrows, and all of that, right? So because these changes are so small, the combination of all of these changes is what really makes the personality, like the characteristics of a person. So whenever you're doing a likeness, I tend to think the likeness comes more from the big shapes first, and the features will. So you can recognize someone from the back, like you say, like a friend far away from the back, you can still recognize that person. The shapes, the shadow shapes, the light shapes, the head shapes are the main important feature in order to capture a likeness. Then you go into the small features, which are obviously also very important, the relationships of everything, but more than accuracy of like how the eye line, the particular of each shape looks like, the combination of everything is the most crucial one. That's why you look at caricatures uh, and they still feel like the person because it's the combination and the relationship of everything, not being precise, but being concise, holistic. It's what makes a character look like a character. It's the personality. It's the combination. It's the abstraction of all of those things together gives you the feeling and the emotions of that person and the read of that person rather than the accuracy of every single line. Quick question for regarding the camera. Are you always using the perspective mode? Or are you? No, I'm always on perspective, but I keep my lenses a little bit flatter, so I'm using like 85 right now. I always find sculpting loose, like this captures likeness essence more accurately than when I focus on being more construction or over engineer. Why that is? So Jordan, that is pretty much what we are talking about, right? There is also a component here though, like because there is not a lot of information, we tend to fill the gaps. So it tends to be a little bit easier the less you have. Once what you have it's somewhat accurate or somewhat, I don't want to use the word accurate, it's somewhat descriptive. But the more you have, now the more relationships you have to correct. So that's why I think there is also the difficulty in making things very simple, but also very descriptive and very accurate. So I think it's it's challenging both ways, right? Do you recommend studying drawing in combination of studying sculpture? Just use that time to sculpt as well, or from. I definitely recommend drawing and painting for sure. I think you should still sculpt the majority of your time, but I think drawing and painting is definitely recommended. Do you feel like people you work with that have a background of traditional sculpture sets them apart in a character role at the studio? 1,000%. No questions on that. All of my digital heroes and all of the people that I work with would tend to detach themselves from the majority. They always have something that the majority doesn't have. It's either a very traditional background or a lot of different sort of like skills. So if you want to get different results than the majority, you got to do things differently than the majority does. And I think most digital artists don't sculpt in clay. So if you start sculpting clay, you're going to be, separating yourself out. And it definitely translates. It translates to becoming, I wouldn't call it better. I would call like you have like a different take on the art. And even this class here, right? Like I'm most likely talking about subjects that are not very well discussed in the digital world. And that gives you an edge and open up the horizons. Hopefully that's the goal with Lava in general. It's to kind of bring this traditional take on modern art. How do you get sure all elements of the personality stick together? So that's something that we got to study and we got to try, and you got to learn what makes a character and what makes a personality. There is no like real recipe here, but that's why I think looking at those relationships between the features, I think it's one of the key components, and looking at the skull and the shapes and the envelope, all of those things together. How do you use these techniques on a more stricter production pipeline that uses a base mesh? So you still take all of this information that we are talking about here as guidelines for you, even when you are building from a base mesh that you got to build the beard after and all of that. You still want to be having these things in mind, because these are more design-ish sort of ideas that will get to translate less or more depending on the style and the production that you have. But in this exercise, it's about how we are building this, but ultimately it's about what we are building, if that makes sense. There have been a variety of studies done on how some of the most successful people tend to have varied interests, not just in art, but in any discipline. 100%, Amanda, 1,000%. Yeah, I agree. For sure. Awesome. Great discussion, folks. This is super fun. But let's get back into some sculpting. All right. I have fresh eyes. I see a lot of things that could be improved. So let's just get on those. Talking about relationships, I think my nose has a very different shape than my reference. I like how I'm overly emphasizing this, but I think I can bring this in a little bit more and kind of make this a little bit more succinct. And this very low bridge of the nose, I think it's also very particular. So I'm kind of gonna do something more like this, which kind of pushes the eye a little bit up. I also want to look into my nose, and I think my nose is a little bit too round. So you see this nice sharp edge here. So I'm going to try to capture that. So I'm going to just throw a couple of strokes here, just flattening that corner. So that's better. And then I'm going to just kind of pull this in, kind of get a little bit more of a square sort of shape here. Okay. So that's much better. That gives me a flatter sort of like cheekbone area here. And when we look at the mouth, I think my lower lips are still protruding out too much. So I'm going to mask this out here. And again, like I said, I'm not against using the move brush, but I just want to be deliberate with some of these choices. So I'm gonna move this in a little bit more. So you see that gives a more of a kind of chin in sort of vibe, with the mustache really pulling out those forms. I think these forms here are a little bit too round on mine, so I want to bring some of those square shapes. So in order to do that, I just want to give a little bit more structure, and using curves will give you sort of like a round flow, soft flow, and harsh lines will give you structure and more rigid and boundaries. So because I really want to kind of get some of these shapes to kind of really contrast between with the face, as we saw on the Carpeau piece, I want to make sure like my beard feels a little bit harsher. So I want to get a little bit more like planes here, and just kind of throw in a couple planes. So we have a more sort of like squarish volume here to kind of give a sense of weight, where my flash is going to be a little bit looser and smoother. Not looser, smoother. Same with the hair here. Let's see if we can get a couple like more harsher lines. All right, so something like this. Okay, that's cool. And let's just gonna get some of these lines here. You see how this is starting to feel? Just by carving this out, the mask of the face now starts to feel a little bit more alive. That's crazy, huh? All right, so I'm just gonna save this, and I'm gonna go up one more subdivision. And because I'm not gonna making any drastic changes anymore, I'm just gonna subdivide. I'm not gonna really dynamesh again. I guess I could dynamesh one more time, but I'm just gonna subdivide because I think I have enough geometry to work with. And maybe we can subdivide it even 2 times. Because now we can actually start playing with brush strokes and leaving a couple marks in the mesh. So we have a good sense, a good structure here. This is, resembling our reference. It doesn't have to be identical, like I said. That's not like a real likeness exercise, anything like that. But you can see how much time I'm spending on this, right? Obviously, I'm talking and I'm kind of going a little bit slower than I would be. But I think this exercise should take you, I'll say like maybe 2 hours. I think it's a good, try to go slower than what you would. If you usually sculpt like this, try to pause and say like, breathe in, breathe out. All right, one brush stroke. Like, why am I going to add another brush stroke? Because I need volume. Okay, can I make my brush stroke a little bit bigger? Please, for today, don't do this. Like, don't do like as much brush strokes as you can. You can do that a different day, but today, try to go slow. All right. Now we can pick and choose which sort of like style we want to do this, right? Like, I think it's at a point where we can go a little bit more on the Reiki-ish mark. We can go very smooth. I'm not going to go very smooth. I know that I don't want to do that. I want to keep it very loose because we have the beard, because we have all of these hair, and we have like a very soft skin. I think I'm going to go with more rake for the skin, for the flash, and more kind of harsher, beefier sort of like strokes for the beard. More like clay build-up sort of like strokes on the beard. So let's do that. So I want to start cleaning up. So I need to do 2 things, right? I need to continue refining my form, especially my eyes. And I need to define the beard. And I also want to clean up the forms and find more shapes in the head. So if we look at some of these planes here that we have, we definitely want to define some of these planes. And we do have the structure of the plane somewhere in place. You see, like this is facing one direction, this is facing another direction, and this is facing another direction. So thinking about a construction, we already have a good starting point. And even if we look into this frontal plane here, this big triangle that we see here, we already have some of that already established. So I don't need to worry too much about the construction. If I look at proportions, I think my eyes are, somewhere in a good place. My forehead to my nose to my chin, it's in a good place. So I think proportion-wise, we have something that we can continue working with. I also like to play with different materials and kind of looking through different lenses when I'm sculpting. So you probably saw that in those videos. I change materials. Sometimes I change lighting too. Because these are matte caps, the lighting is not going to do anything. But depending on what I'm doing, if I want to do something a little bit more shape-based, that lighting is going to be very important in the read of the character. I might play with the light as well. Okay, so let's just kind of go on this because this is a little bit softer on the eyes. I think this green, bluish sort of material, I'm liking it, but I tend to get really fatigued with the yellow contrast with the green. Like it gets like pretty harsh very quickly in my eyes. I think this one, the purple to the yellow, it's a little bit of like a softer contrast. So let's just go with this one. All right, so let's kind of go around the eyes. I think it's a good point for us to do some eye work. I want to go around the eyes as if I was painting. I tend to paint the eyes around the eyes and the eyes kind of shape themselves. So I'm doing everything with symmetry here. Obviously, you don't have to, but just for the sake of the class and the sake of what I'm trying to get out of this exercise, today is a little bit about exploring these different ideas, right? Not having symmetry will force us to think about different things, but I think for today, it's totally fine. All right, so I'm just gonna block it out. Remember that we decided that we're gonna keep more brush strokey around hair, so we can kind of get that contrast between hair. And we're gonna keep it a little bit more on the Reiki, sort of like cleaner forms on everything else. So I wanna kind of try to capture like some of these lines here. So look at these relationships. So these lines are probably around here. So I'm gonna be building a little bit of form. I'll clean up this later. So I'm building form with my clay brush, and then I'm gonna look at the whole shape of the eye. So I wanna see my top eyelid here, and I wanna make sure my top eyelid here, and then my full eye is gonna go here. And remember, like we have these dots here, which are kind of helping us to guide the actual size of the eye. So that's something that it's very cool to see. And we can use that to our advantage. Our lower lid is gonna be roughly around here. So I'm just gonna throw a line. We don't need to be very precise yet. So I'm just gonna throw a line, lower lid. And okay, so we have something like the eyes are starting to get represented here. So some of these things here, like the eyes are forms that we need to kind of subdivide multiple times just because they are like very small and they have like many different changes. So I want to be a little bit more precise. So I still want to try to find simplistic shapes in order to give me the form of the eyes, but I'm just kind of breaking up into like one line here, which is kind of what I see here. And then I'm going to try to find, let me just kind of go zoom in here. Look at how the sphere, the eyeball is here and how bigger, like you can actually see the inside of the eyelids. Is that true in reality? No, right? Like our eyelids are much thinner and connected, but it really emphasizes this shape. And this is something that he did is an abstraction and a simplification that I think it's pretty cool. So let's try to learn from that. So I can actually push my eyes in a little bit more and really get that form here. And that's why we talked about shape design, right? So he's designing some of these shapes. So then it looks pretty cool. From side view, you can actually see all of that. So some of these things may not translate very well to 3D, and that's fine too. So, okay, so this is probably good here. So we got our eyes, and let's just try to kind of make these eyes looking up because we are working with symmetry. It might be very hard to just get like the orientation. So I'm just gonna throw something here. We can kind of fix this later. So just gonna throw something there. I think that's good. You know, I'm not trying to make things like perfectly round or anything like that. It doesn't matter right now. Let's just get some of these shapes here a little bit better. Carve that in. We can even add you know, more of like the Bernini, Michelangelo, classical sort of like highlight if we want. But you can actually see like how this is starting to take shape. I'm not gonna work too much on the eyes right now. I wanna continue doing everything else. I wanna pull this in. I don't want this to be kind of coming out too much. And I wanna fill in these gaps, right? I want the eyes to feel connected to the face and not completely disconnected. So I'm gonna be filling some of these gaps here. And you can actually see there is like a very clear space here, and we can use some of these directions here. So basically that's kind of the brush stroke that I'm doing here. And I want to clean up this so it feels like a more of a plane. I don't like how this is reading as another shape, so I want to get some of these shapes here and kind of separate this out. So I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that shape there, and I want to kind of separate this out like this. So I'm keeping that everything very loose, right? Like I'm trying to define and think through what I'm doing and not overly doing anything. Okay? So let's continue. I think this is getting somewhere. Let's continue building. We don't see a lot of structure here, but once we build the skull, we're actually going to see that there is a difference in plane, and we have a corner here that I value a lot personally. So if we look on the 3/4 view, this edge here needs to be pulled out a little bit. So there is an intersection here, a triangular shape here. You can actually see from here, there is like a breakup here. Let's see if we see on the other side. Yeah, we don't see, but there is a little bit here, right? So that's kind of the breakup that I'm talking about. I do value that a lot. And again, different people value different things. And that's something that I choose to put on or to really pay an extra attention. So I want to get this corner out a little bit. And to me, that tends to give a little bit more structure into my heads. So you see that now I'm choosing to kind of add that in there. And again, something that I personally value. And some people don't, and some people choose to get rid of that, right? Like whenever you are sculpting a human, you can pick and choose. And when it might not be very obvious. I think this is actually very obvious for like people who are designing characters and just kind of doing like cartoonish and whatever. Like it's very obvious that you are designing everything. But even when we are doing something like this, it tends to be more under the realistic realm. We are still designing and we are still picking and choosing and selectively making choices. And I think that's crucial. It's not like this is the right way of modeling a human head. It's much more than that. I think some people may find this very eye-opening because we tend to believe like, what is the right way? Like, what is the correct way? No, there are things that are wrong, but multiple things that are correct, if that makes sense. And that's kind of why different people have different styles. Even at work, different people will solve problems differently too. So that's why the model will never look the same done by different people. All right, cool. So this is coming along. I'm liking where this is headed. I'm gonna continue refining some of these forms. I feel like this is getting a little bit too blobby. And if we look at our reference, there is sort of like a higher point here facing up. So I wanna add just a little bit volume here. And I wanna kind of break that plane here. You see, this is adding a little bit of volume there, getting a little bit more information here. Let's kind of find this line here that I said it's not very clear, but I want to make sure at least while I'm cleaning forms out, I have a separation between nasolabial and lips forms. Okay? So let's refine this nose a little bit more, get more of like that clean structure. So we have this shape here and this shape kind of connected here. So I'm gonna actually leave that a little bit more, a little bit harsh like that. Let's look at our forehead. We have this plane here, this form, this round plane, and we also have that construction from the Van der Pol that we talked about. So we already have those planes. So you see like one plane here, and we are already turning form here. So I can actually just focus on now introducing this more rounder structure here. And basically, I'm trying to add clay to all of these moments, and we're gonna clean it up with the rake brush. Let's look at our glabella, which is this T shape here, and I think I want to add a little bit more form. Remember that we were just very loose, and we just kind of threw a couple strokes in there, but I think this is good. Let's continue working, and let's just kind of clean up these ears. I think this is just very soft. I want to get some of these shapes here to feel a little bit sharper. So basically just looking at working some of these transitions. And you can see that I'm not going across every single form identically. I'm really trying to minimize what I choose to work on and kind of what is the simplest amount of information that I need to kind of convey this. It becomes a little bit about style and about personality, and that's kind of me working out these exercises, right? All right, so this is good. We can kind of maybe make this a little bit more. I don't want this to turn too generic still, so we can kind of clean it up after, but it's getting a little bit more conclusion or resolution. So my eyes, I think they are a little bit weird, so I think I'm gonna close them, pull them together a little bit more, and I'm also gonna bring these movements. What this is gonna do is actually gonna make this zygomatic pull out a little bit more, and then I can just kind of pull this in. And again, obviously we are working with a painting here. We don't have a lot of reference from different angles, and we are also not trying to capture the likeness. So again, I'm more concerned about this looking cool rather than looking identical, but I think we are getting close. All right, now it's time for some rake brush. So what I want to do here is to clean up all of these forms. I don't want to randomly just do this, right? Like, because I'm going to be destroying all of the forms that I'm doing. So I'm going to now overly emphasize the forms that I have here. What I mean by that is, let's look at this. I'm just going to extract this for the sake. Let's look at this example here, right? So if I were to just kind of break this down, and now we can think completely abstractly. I see a form here. I see another breakup form here that I decided that these were breakup forms, either by the painting or by my skull understanding of my design sense, right? Like I decided that those were breakup points, and I decided those before this stage. So I also see a plane breakup here, and then this is like one plane that we want to clean up to get that clear read of bang, like this upper part and this lower part. Some other models may not have this triangle. They will have like a nasolabial fold more like this, where this is a little bit more rounder. It really depends. But I see all of these things, right? And some of these things that actually happened automatically by the brush stroke, some of these things were completely planned. But anyways, this is all I see here. So the way I'm going to use the rake brush, I have this on a hotkey. I'm going to hold Alt to go on the negative, and I'm going to clean up these forms. So I want to emphasize these forms here. So I'm going to clean up these forms here in one way, finding these forms, and then these forms here, I'm going to clean another way. So basically, I'm separating those planes and overly emphasizing those planes. When it comes to these sections here, like I said, I want to make sure like this volume here is protruding. So I'm kind of going around here, and now I'm kind of emphasizing the transition between these planes here. Does that make sense? And now you can actually start adding secondary forms and tertiary forms. Now it's very subtle, but now we have like a really divot here. We have planes here. We have more forms here. And this is where the whole magic of finding subtle forms starts to happen. This can be done with the clay brush. This can be done with smooth. It doesn't really matter. But that's the point, is that you now start observing what you have on your model, on your painting, on your drawing. And then you double down on all of these informations whenever you feel you gauge necessary. So, okay, so I'm going this way now. I'm gonna clean up this bigger form. I'm gonna use like a slightly bigger brush. And then here, let's kind of get rid. You can see, oops, you can see now how much form starts to show up here. And this is the type of stuff that gets that feel of very, of weight in the models. It's the shape, it's the differences between harsh and soft and plane angles and plane changes and subtlety and subordination, right? Like everything is subdued to those bigger forms that we found. Anyway, so let's just continue here. I'm gonna go into this triangle here now. I'm gonna now, because I want to make this flat, I'm gonna make all of flat in one direction. I'm gonna go against the same direction and gonna go again. And this is just making like a flatter plane, but it's still organic, right? I don't want this to feel like a hard surface plane. That's not the point. And the transition between these planes, I can now start softening them so it doesn't feel like very, very planarish. Same here. Remember, we defined and we said, hey, we need to know where the transitions of those planes are. It's because whenever we are in this mode now, it might be very hard to kind of think about everything all at once. But you can actually see now how this starts to feel very sound, and we have these structures in place. Okay, now let's move on to the nose. I want to continue building. So I see a form here and I see a form here. And to be honest, maybe I'm not really seeing all of that either, but that's what I wish I was seeing. I think I learned this one with watching some Jeffrey Watts videos, or maybe in the online class. I'm pretty sure he says that in online videos, whatever. Like, part is what you see, part is what you know, and part is what you wish you saw, something like that. I know, Amanda, you study with him, so maybe you can fill up the gaps. But so that idea that maybe I don't really see this, but I wish I was seeing like some nicer, stronger forms here. Well, I do see a breakup here, and I do see the light changing there. So there's something there for sure. But I wish I was seeing, and that's a little bit about the style, the conceptualization, idealizing. But I wish I saw a little bit more form there. So why don't we just kind of build a little bit more form? So yes, here. So I'm cleaning up. And whenever I want to find like a plane here, I'm just going to go around this. And this is exactly what I would do in clay. And that's why this feels so natural to me, because I spent so many years just sculpting in clay. But you can actually see that I'm actually creating a plane here by doing this, right? Here, I want to make sure I'm simplifying, and we also have like this breakup here and this top plane. So I don't want to round everything equally. So I want to make sure I'm keeping this side plane here, this bottom plane, side plane-ish, and like this top plane, just to kind of do justice to what we see in our reference. And again, we want to study from this guy, so that's kind of what I'm doing. Defining a little bit more of a plane here as well. And let's just kind of continue working on the shape of the nose. And again, look at my nose example. I'll also look at different nose diagrams. You're gonna see a lot of like cool structures. If you're interested, you can also understand like why these structures exist, and that's where anatomy kind of plays a nice role into this. We're gonna discuss some of that when we go into building the skull. All right, cool. So this is coming along. I want to keep cleaning up. So let's just continue cleaning up some of these forms. I want to make this very clean because these shapes are clean. The more contrast between the shapes we find, the easier stuff will pop, or the more things will pop. So if I really want to emphasize the eyes, I make everything around the eyes very smooth and very clean, and then it will make the eyes pop. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. Although I have harsh lines, the overall structure is very simple, right? So the big read here is simple, and then we only have this very harsh line here, which is really kind of making the eyes pop, as we see in the painting. So cleaning up some of these, I think I want to, clean up these areas here as well. So just gonna bring my brush, make it a little bit bigger, and continue cleaning up. And remember, we built these volumes here, so I'm gonna clean up these volumes, and I'm not destroying the volumes, right? I'm cleaning up the surface. I'm kind of helping define some of these shapes, going circular motions. And this is something that you need to experiment with and really understand what kind of directions and what happens when you do these brush strokes. And again, you don't need to use this brush. You can use the clay brush, clay buildup, any other brush you may find, some like clay brushes and whatnot. But it's just the idea of separating things out. You see like how much more structure we have now. So this is starting to feel very sound and strong forms, right? Okay. So now let's start working on some of the secondary forms here. Let me get rid of all of these crazy lines. All right, so let's look at some of the nuances. This shape here is connecting with this plane here, and I want to make sure I'm getting that connection. So let's kind of get this guy here, and then make sure this guy here is connecting. Now I'm releasing Alt because I want to add a little bit of clay, and I'm using the same brush to add a little bit of clay and kind of fill up the gaps and the cavities. So now I can actually use that to kind of construct some of these forms too. And I want to leave some of these marks. These marks going this way is telling me the eyes to go up. I don't want that. I want the eyes to kind of go this way here. So I'm going to kind of go across the form and around the form because I want to really give this sense of roundness that we see in the concept, or not in the concept, in the painting by Solomon. All right, cleaning up some of that. All right, we're gonna go back to the eyes after in a bit. Let's just kind of rest up from the eyes a little bit more. Let's just work on this beard. So the beard, multiple ways of sculpting this, right? Like we don't have a ton of time, and I think we want to just kind of continue this simplification. So I'm gonna go with the clay buildup, and I want to find a couple like marks here. I want to group these things together. I don't want them to be individual, stuff like this, because it's gonna feel pretty boring. So I want to group some of these. So this is gonna be like a big clump. I want to do another one here. I want to do another one there. Maybe just start helping me to refine direction. So I'm thinking more about volume rather than individual hair strands. I want to get some of these, kind of indicating some of these things here. Let's see some big patches and, some sort of like curls here and there. Let's zoom out. Okay. So let's look at this connection here. So this, our beard are already here, and we can actually start this beard from here. And let's so that's the part of the calligraphy that we were talking about, right? Like each one of us will have sort of like a different stroke length, direction, C-shaped curve. And this is something that you develop, and that's something that I've been trying to find my own for years, and slowly is starting to appear. And then if I just to kind of, I like doing stuff like this. So for example, I like doing like lines and then kind of doing small breakups like this, for example. I think, I don't know where I picked this one from. I think maybe just trying to copy some artists. There might be I don't know, but I like having like clean lines and then just kind of little wiggles for some reason. I guess it's just this combination of um, clean and smooth and straights and curves and all of that. All right, so let's just look from the side. I want to get some bigger statements here, like the overall volume of the beard. I think it's looking good, but I want to kind of find like some bigger breakups. I want to have like one here and one on each side, just to kind of get a little bit more more interest in this shape, just kind of subdividing that and breaking that up a little bit more, so it doesn't feel just like a single block. Yeah, something like this. Let's just kind of clean up some of these forms here. Bring this in a little bit more. I really want to now start adding some sharp lines. So what I'm going to do now, let's see. I think my eyes are a little bit too big still. I'm just kind of, yes, so that's better. I know I said I'm not going to do like a full likeness or anything like that, but I can't resist just to kind of make this feel a little bit more natural. Can I find more overlaps here? I think if I just pull this in, it will make these parts pop out a little bit more, and I think that is cool. So same here, I think I can pull this out. And from the side view, can we exaggerate some things just to kind of help with this illusion? So I think I'm gonna, now I'm using the DEM standard, I'm just gonna add a couple strands here and find some harsher lines. And we're gonna start using that idea here and there just to kind of give a sense of more finish. So you can see like now I'm adding like sharper lines here and there, and just by doing this is gonna help us feel things are a little bit more finished. We can do this selectively, right? Like we don't need to do this everywhere. Then we can do this here. Just kind of get a couple of these moments where we could get a little bit more resolution in a sense of resolving corners of the mouth. I think it's important to get this sharp. So let's get some of these movements here. Let's see. So here, I think I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna make this a little bit stronger, and just to kind of be a little bit easier on my wrists. And I'm gonna try to just kind of get some of these sharper lines here, and let's see, maybe get some of this movement a little bit better on the hair. And maybe we can even kind of throw a couple loose strands here. Let's just kind of merge these things together. Yes, so we don't need to be very descriptive with everything. Literal, we can just kind of, you can see how getting sharp lines really makes a change, like really changes things, right? It changes the whole perception, because now we have a much more contrasty range to work with. It's the same when you are painting and then you add a darker color. Now your whole range of values expand. Some people like to paint with full range from the get-go. Some people like to add range as they go. I think it's the same with sculpture. Like some people, actually I know amazing sculptors, they actually work like this, like very harsh, and they slowly clean up and slowly fill in the gaps. I think I tend to do a little bit of both, depending on what I'm doing, depending on the intentionality of the boldness that I'm feeling on the day. I tend to work a little bit harsher, but I think I'm kind of a little bit in the middle. Like I work with some range. Some other people like work like this, right? Like they kind of very slow and kind of slowly building up. I think it depends on the subject matter for me and actually how I'm feeling that day. If I'm brave and bold, and I might do. All right, I don't want to do the whole hair. I just want to kind of throw a couple like indications of what could be the hair. So, you know, whatever we look at, we feel that this would be, you know, the volume of the hair. Like the idea of the hair is we really want to think about volume. Loose strands and flyaways and all of that are good to indicate whenever you're sculpting, but it's ultimately the volumes, the shapes, right? Like the actual form containing the hair. All right, so let's do this. Let's just kind of get a couple of more of like some of these lines here. Also, you can see that I'm not doing this like identically everywhere. I'm kind of letting my eye rest a little bit, and then I'm picking it up again, you know, maybe here, and then I'm kind of cleaning it up. So finding a good rhythm between these lines too. This is about composition, it's about design, it's about aesthetic, where we selectively add to the viewer information. Sorry, I'm kind of pausing a little bit because it gets to a point that it's very hard to kind of talk and do all of these things at the same time. So hopefully I'm still making sense of what I'm saying. All right, cool. So this is coming to an end. I think this is actually looking pretty sweet. You know, might not be perfect, and let's just kind of clean up the eyes now. So on the eyes, I'm gonna be very selectively with what I do. I wanna clean up this form here, so I'm not gonna go across the form like this. I'm gonna add sharpness in some of these areas. I'm gonna clean up a little bit of this eyelid. I wanna make this very clear. And this corner, which this corner is gonna give us like a sharper shadow, which is the corner of the eye. And then this one here too, I wanna see if I can actually get a little bit cleaner, so then it feels a little bit more finished. This lower eyelid, I wanna get a little bit of volume here, probably. And maybe just kind of find a little bit of separation here. Okay. Let's see if we can now add back. We ended up losing our eyebrows. So the eyebrows, they have movement and they have direction. So I'm just gonna use a different language, visual language, which is harsher. And I'm not sculpting individual eyebrow hairs or anything like that. I'm just kind of getting a sort of like harsher modeling plane changes to them, right? So I'm just gonna kind of add a little bit more volume, the same way that we are doing with the beard. I'm just trying to capture that change. So we can continue cleaning up this year. There is a lot of work that we could be doing here, but to be honest, I think this is coming to a good stopping point. Let's see. I think the eyes are very important to get right, and so let me just kind of work a little bit more. So I'm just cleaning up some of those curvatures, right? And when it comes to this, there is like this bag coming this way, so I think we can just add that by adding a little bit of volume here. And let's just kind of use the rake brush just to kind of clean up, but there's at least a little bit of movement here. And that movement is sort of like overlapping everything. So you feel like this feels much more natural. And let's just kind of add a little bit more volume here. And clean up this corner. All right. I think this is actually coming along nicely. Let's see if we can, let's change the material and kind of look at it again. It's probably a good stopping point for the exercise. So I think if you guys get to something like this, it doesn't have to be this reference, right? Like it can be anything. You should probably do a couple of these this week. And that would be great. Just play with these different concepts, different ideas. Yeah, I think I'm getting a little bit blind already. I'm having a hard time to distinguish like what looks cool and what looks not. But honestly, I think this is actually, pretty decent. Let's just kind of do a couple renders. I like doing this, just kind of moving the light a little bit and kind of throwing a couple renders just to see like how things are feeling. I think it's looking great. Oh boy. Yeah, some of these shapes are nice. Let's just kind of get a little bit more softness in these shadows. Yeah, all right, this looks cool. Sweet. I think we're good here. Yeah, let me just get rid of this because I keep comparing. It's not a matter, it's not about comparing anymore. It's just about this. So I think I could throw a couple extra lines here just to help. So maybe let me just kind of get a little bit, I think, get a little bit more of the calligraphy stuff. I think I miss a little bit of like a line here just to kind of separate these things. There's like so much stuff happening here that it's getting lost because it's so soft. So I think we can get a line here, maybe separating this a little bit more. I think this corner of the nose could also use a little bit more sharpness. This corner of the eye, I think could also be a little bit sharper, so then it gives a little bit more pop when we look at this. A little bit more contrast here. The nose, I think my bottom lips could have a little bit of volume here just for the sake of having something there. But I don't mind that it's not really not defined. And maybe some of these curls could be more sculpted, and we could spend a lot of time just like doing these curls, but I think I'm more interested in just like the bigger movement. And I'm pretty sure there are like sculpted brushes for clay, and we can actually start sculpting a lot of these, right? Like we can go into some of the movement. You can see, like, look at how Bernini sculpted some of these curls, or like Carpo, or like any of those guys, right? But I think it's beyond this exercise. It becomes a very technical sort of endeavor, which I don't think we have to do at this moment. I think it's about something else. It's great. Let's just kind of add a little bit more form here. Yeah, I think this is looking cool. You know, that 3/4 view that I mentioned, like this corner, I think we could be pushing this corner a little bit more. So I'm very gently pushing for him here. Because I want to get a little bit more of this anatomy in the shapes here. So maybe let's just kind of bring this in a little bit more. There you go. All right, I think I'm pretty happy. I think so. Not sure if you are happy, but I think I'm getting happy. Yes. These all of these final touches that I'm doing right now, they tend to make a huge difference, right? So just be careful, but it's very important. All right, so that is great. Well, as a fun exercise, right? Again, like yours may look better than mine, yours may look worse than mine. It doesn't matter. Again, focus on what the exercise is giving you. It's giving you different tools. It should be fun to kind of solve this challenge. And it should be fun to explore these different things. And you may try things that look good, you may try things that look bad. So it's ultimately about just trying and getting out of the comfort zone and going onto this unknown world of techniques and tools and ideas, and trying it out. So try to mix between matching shapes, try to think about structure, try to think about anatomy, try to think about all of the things that I talked about today. I don't know what's going to happen, but just give it a shot and try. For those of you who are on the critique program, the exercise, I'm going to post in the group too, but the exercise is to pick one painting, specifically a painting, and try to replicate the process here. And once you're done, just post in the group and I will record feedback for you. For everybody else, I would totally encourage, even for the critique students too, I would encourage everybody to just do more than just one this week. Do from a painting, do from a photo, do from imagination, whatever, right? Just really try, well, maybe from imagination might be a little bit too hard, but do exercise from imagination too, go ahead and maybe do one sketch a day or one every 2 days. Post in the Discord, and the more you guys share between yourselves, I think this is a really good opportunity for everybody just to share and learn and kind of getting and engage and build a community and all of that, and learn from each other. So this is the time where I stop and we go into Q&A, and let me just go over the chat real quick. And let me just save this thing here. I think I saved this already. Let me just save again. All right. Yes, cool. I'm just reading everybody, right? Like, I wish I could see your form. Yeah, so the idea, okay, so Simone is asking, I wish I could see that form, reminded me to that my anatomy teacher used to say when analyzing references, assume it's there even if you can't clearly see it. Yes, 100%. I think the idea here is we are bringing our knowledge and our design sense and our aesthetics into place. So, well, in this case here, the painter chose to remove things, chose to add things, right? So there's clearly an interpretation. But the idea here is that even if we don't see something here, there is something there, right? And then you can choose to add or to remove it. And the more you know anatomy, the more you know the underlying structure, the more you can actually play with those things. I heard from the Russian teacher Ilya that I study with that at the St. Petersburg Academy they tend to study, I think, like 2 years of anatomy, like an insane amount of anatomy. And then at one point, the goal is to forget about anatomy. So it becomes so ingrained that they don't even discuss anatomy in the later years at study. And I think that's sort of kind of what I'm aiming towards too. So then the parts of the anatomy that I bring forward or that I use to kind of uh, resolve are more intuitional, I guess, intuitive in a way. I'm not sure if I studied that much anatomy to be able to do that, but anyway, this is just like my ideas. Lentari wrote something about how sculptors should remember that we also working with light. One example, remember sculpting hair. 100%, man, 100%. 100%. Even like the color of the eyes, right? Like, so if you, like Bernini did this too, like whenever we're sculpting lighter irises, for example, they would make them shallow. And then whenever they wanted to sculpt like darker irises, they would make like them deeper because of the harshness of the shadows. Lanteri has a really good book. I forgot the name. I have it here. It's, I think, sculpting something, but it's an amazing read. He also talks about not smoothing the forms, and the forms should smooth themselves as you work and develop the forms more and more, which is something that I find very interesting, especially when we start using the rake brush. The more you go into smaller forms and you clean up smaller forms, the surface becomes smoother by nature. That's something that I picked up on many years ago. I know it's not the point of a class, but I wanted to take this to the next stage. How would you clean up the rake stroke? Start modeling pores and details? Would you just like to move everything? Start with using decals? Exactly, Antonio. So in the case that, for example, something like this, I can just kind of clean it up like this very gently, for example. And then all of my underlying structure that I clean up, it's already here. And then here is the point that I can either refine the forms a little bit more and then start putting pores and details and fine wrinkles and all of that. I usually use, very basic set of alphas, but I'm pretty sure there are more advanced alphas out there these days. But basically, I just stamp a bunch of alphas, combine multiple alphas in different locations. I can open up some files next class. I can get ready and prepared for that. But that's basically it. And fine wrinkles, and the combination of wrinkles, direction. The pores have different shapes and different sizes and different personalities, like different characteristics, depending on where they are in the head. We also have memory folds type of things. We also have yeah, defining the bottom of the lips added a lot. Wow, that stuff like that can come right near the end. Yes, for sure. Can't wait to dive deep into those. That's awesome. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, I love that, Amanda. Uh, I agree. Thanking my errors. Unfortunately, I have so many of those. So I have so much to thank for. It's great to see your approach to study this paint. Do you have any experience sculpting stone or wood? I tried sculpting wood a couple times, and stone, to be very fair, when I started sculpting in clay, I tried sculpting in stone as well. But at that time, yeah, what was in the early beginnings. The more carving approach that I have is just pumpkins. I do carve a lot of pumpkins every Halloween, and it's a very, you can only take stuff away, right? So it's much more uh, it's less forgiving than being able to add clay back. Uh, do you plan on doing a video mentorship? Unfortunately, not at the moment, but I do want to run some sort of like mentorship stuff with Lava. I'm looking into other instructors to come and help. I don't know. This is something that I'm still trying to figure it out. What exactly I'm going to do, but that's something that a lot of people have been requesting. Um, yeah, stay tuned for that. I'll release more information. Alex, the Discord is for everybody. Like the critique is just a different group inside of the website. So Discord is for everybody. Everybody should have access, and go ahead and post and share as much as you guys want. I might not be able to give critiques there though, because it's a lot. So I'm gonna be giving critiques just to the students on the critique seating. It's mainly because of time. A couple of questions. We talked about making major plans and going more into the head. We introduced and going more into head. We can introduce smaller plans. If how much plans can. How much of the plane resolution is enough to get something natural in the end? The planes are mainly a distribution of where the majority of those areas are pointing towards to. So the more planar you get, the more abstract you feel. It can help you with brush stroke and direction, but apart from that, we don't see any planes, right? Like you actually don't see the edges of the planes. We do see directions, right? Like every part in the face is pointing to a specific direction. So the planes are mainly grouping those directions into same areas. So right, like all of these tends to point this way. So let's define this as a plane, but there is no plane here, right? Like all of these things are there are little curvatures, little shapes, and all of that. So it really depends on the subject. It really depends on the style that you're building, but ultimately it's just about simplifying and grouping things together to give you guidelines and orientation whenever you're sculpting and you are lost. When you do the realistic head, how much of anatomy is enough to make something believable? Something believable can be done without any understanding of anatomy if you are literally just copying what you see and you can truly capture exactly what you see. It is very hard to do that because a lot of things you can't really see, but they are there, especially when dealing with 3D sculpture, right? Like, so because it's like three dimensionality. But technically, if you copy everything exactly as they are, if you have like a scan machine and you are able to scan something using your brush and your pen, you're going to get one-to-one results. But I think it's practically impossible to do that without understanding underlying anatomy or some sort of way to guide you through the process, which can be abstractions like the planes of the head and all of that. So I think knowing a little bit of everything is the best approach to that. Going with the form with the rake brush, I don't get that expression. So going with the form and against the form, so I can help you that. Okay, so the form, let me make something very obvious, right? So the form is here, and the form here can be illustrated as we have a major changing planes this way and a major changing planes this way, right? Depending on where the form is at, if the form is pointing, let's say like, well, I made something that it might be like too similar. So let's just kind of build this something like this. And let's just think that this is a form that it's going this way, right? So there is a direction to this form and this form is going this way, right? So when I say, well, someone can say like the form is actually going this way. So then that becomes kind of semantics a little bit. But when I say going with the form and against the form, I mainly say suggesting that you go with the form and against the form, across the form, right? So when you are drawing, there's something that we do like cross hatching, that you hatch in a certain direction. Which direction are you hatching? Are you hatching with the form or against the form? So in this case here, with the rake brush, I'm going across the form because I tend to believe my form is going this way, or I can go with the form. I could also go in a diagonal direction. I can go this way, but this will not complement the form in any way, shape, or form, right? This is not helping me see the direction of the form or the direction of the volume or the form of the form. This is actually against everything that happens there. So I tend to find this very distractive. So I would do this whenever I want to detach something from everything surrounding. So if I have stuff like this, and I have stuff like this, for example, and I want to have like a sort of like different texture and feel to this section, I can do whatever. I can do like some random strokes here. And this random volume will actually make things pop. Because if I go this, even keeping the same form, you can see that my eyes will blend all of this together, right? And then if I go this against the form here, I also have some sort of like distraction from those shapes, and things are popping too. So these are all, they go beyond what the model is actually doing. They go on what the eyes are actually observing, which I also think is important. Hopefully that helps. When do you, Glauc, choose to put some of the sharp lines? I tend to put more sharp lines towards the end, which I'm kind of defining my darker darks, and really getting things to feel complete. For those of you who took my painting, my texturing class, on the creature, I actually do a lot of these ideas when I'm texturing things too. I add harsh details here. When I'm finalizing something, even with pores, I will add certain harsher pores here and there, really helping me to navigate between the face and the details on the face, the same way that I would do in a painting, the same way that I'm do on a 3D model. It's about giving the viewer a flow, a gesture, a direction, so things can read very well. This class is a lot different than others I've done, in more opinion. That's awesome to hear. Right on, man. Right on. That's cool. Yes, Modeling and Sculpting the Human Figure, Eduardo Lanteri. Yeah, that's the book. Do you have any recommendations on how to use Pomodoro technique for these first exercises? Maybe do, I'm not sure if that would be technically Pomodoro, but maybe do 20 minutes, 5 minutes break, and then do 20 minutes again. If you're doing this, I mentioned like 2 hours for this exercise, so maybe just do blocks of 30 minutes. That's probably fine. But I personally like to work 20 minutes blocks. I think it's a good balance. Even when I'm painting, I do 20 minutes. Even if I still feel like in a rush, like continue painting, usually I stop, and then even if it's just kind of walking up and just coming back, like less than a minute, I try to pause. So I find 20 minutes a good enough amount of chunk of time for me. But honestly, try with that too. If you feel just kind of going, and just keep going too, I don't want to create like any rules or anything like that. The only thing I would really encourage you to do is just to think through everything you're doing. I think this is going to go such a long way. I promise. Think about what you're doing and why you want to add volume there and why you're doing. Maybe just talk to yourself. Oh, my head looks big. Let me make this head smaller, rather than just kind of nonsensically moving stuff until it feels okay. I think there's a point for that. When you are designing stuff, I think it is cool to actually just throw a bunch of stuff and see what happens. It's just different than what we're doing today. Okay. So I'm not against freely moving around. I do that. For those of you, when we're sketching the creature, I was actually going crazy and doing a bunch of stuff until something clicked. So there is a point for that too. Yes. When you consider the exercise done, because there's always room for polishing. For sure. I think this is done for me. I think I have already achieved what I wanted to achieve, which is to study this head. And I think there is diminishing returns on continuing this. If I felt like I really want to sculpt this beard a little bit better, sure, I can spend more time. I can continue refining the face, but there is not a lot of room here anymore to capturing this amount of details and this amount of I can make this more accurate for sure, like in comparison to the painting, but also I think this is good enough. Like whenever you feel like this is good enough, just stop and move on to the next one. Thank you. Thank you. Glad you guys are enjoying top to class. But in a character art role, are you expected to know things like rigging and animation? Yes, for sure. Like the basics of rigging and animation, it is expected in order to work with the different teams. It's very important to understand how it works. Do you have recommendations for painters we can take as reference? Maybe some painters that aren't really famous. I will post. I will give you access to these to the pure ref that I built. So it's gonna be on the website. You all can download the pure ref. So hopefully those are like good starting points. But then you can, if you go like 19th century, for example, if you go to the French Academy, the Art Academy. I'm not gonna try to pronounce that in French, but the École of Beaux-Arts, something like that. uh, that school in the 19th century painters, I think it's great for what we're talking about. Go to Ramon Hurtado website too. He has a huge, vast amount of references or painting and names that you can search and Google and kind of discover this whole new world of painters that may give you insights on different things. Yeah, the resource files I mentioned, like this head and everything else, is going to be on the program. So if you go to the day one or resources, I remember how I put it, but basically you can just click and there's going to be downloadable links there. I just need to upload these things now. So, give you like an hour after the class is over. Also for the recording, it takes usually like 4 or 5 hours. So basically I'm recording on Riverside, which is this software. It takes like 3 hours for the team to be able to download, and they will upload into the website directly. So I would say like between 4 and 5 hours from now, the recording should be up there, sometimes a little bit less. But yeah, just to kind of keep that in mind. It's stuck in the block out, it's going to shapes. Yes. Antonio, I think the confidence will come from pushing through. So even if you don't feel like it's right, just push through. And you will understand over time what kind of primary forms and secondary forms give you the tertiary and the finish that you're looking for. But until you actually try to push through, you're not going to be able to get the confidence, because the confidence usually comes from, even if something looks pretty off, you know that if you keep going, it will look good. But you got to push and you got to go through in order to gain the confidence, right? So just settle on whatever feels right for the moment and make the best guess with the information you have at that moment. When you're starting out, you don't have a lot of information. When you're starting out the model, I mean, remember those best guesses that I made with the beard of like, I think this is good enough for now. Let's move on. And then you can keep adjusting. So it's never like a true final ending, because you can move stuff around. You can add clay and remove clay. It's very forgiving. Awesome. Great to hear. No, the sketch videos I share are all live recorded, so they are not sped up. Because they are like all 20 minutes, 30 minutes. They don't have any commentary though, but they might be not the best fun videos to watch, but they are like as I did, everything as I did. Sometimes I actually pause, like look at stuff, but I just press record, I did the exercises, and then I post it to you guys. Do you plan on redoing some of the classes like the Creature for Games? Yeah, I plan on doing all of these classes more times, but I just don't know when. Probably next year. I'm not sure if I'm going to have time this year to do more classes. We'll see. Awesome. Thank you. I feel like I don't pay enough for that class. Can I send more money? Yes, of course. Arthur Le Boussard. Call the yes. I need to kind of get my French on point. Awesome. Thank you so much. It looks like you guys have a good time. I had a blast. I get that this sounds like an easy exercise, but what tip do you have to help avoid these random strokes? I feel like I keep trying to make thoughtful strokes, but at some point it automatically get back again to the random strokes. Not sure if you had problem at some point. It really helps to go with the flow. Try to go with the forms. Think about the anatomy and the muscles if that helps, or try to go with the direction of the shapes and keep it simple. I think that's the best thing you can do, is to keep it simple. Or just copy some of these exercises. Maybe open this head. I don't like saying like, hey, copy my thing, because I don't want to be pretentious that this is the best you can do. But because you're going to have access to this file, just try to copy some of these directions here. Maybe try to get scans of like master artists and try to copy some of the direction of those strokes too. That kind of thing. I think that's the best way. Could you please take a tiny bit about how the critique and how it's taking place? Are you critiquing one of the exercises that we'll be doing? Is there a dedicated channel of Discord? So for those who sign up for the critique, you have access inside of the website to a critique group. So it's a different group, and that's where I'm going to get all of the critique. For everybody else that joined after the critique was sold out, you can use the Discord as much as you want. Felix, I'm sorry, but I'm not sure which group you are part of. But the critique, I'm going to critique at least one exercise this week. So maybe pick the best one, or pick the first one you do, whatever you want. Post the reference image that you're using, post the final result, and I'm going to record a video. And if I need to see the ZBrush file, I usually ask the ZBrush file there. So we're going to be interacting there, but that's not on Discord. It's a different group on the website. For everybody else, I may be lurking in the Discord group, but I can't really give individual critiques there. I don't have time, and also it kind of defeats the purpose of having the critique sitting in the website. Oh, that's good. It's good that you guys liked it. Glad to help this. Love the exercise. Great. Never heard about the triangles of the face before. Yeah, all of these planes of the face, this type of things, I think it's very good to just look at the references that I sent, right? Like Vanderpool, planes of the face, Asaro, all of those things. Do you think it's okay to post sketches or sculpt that are just sculpts in our portfolio in a big post? Yeah, if that's on the Discord, sure, you can do that. The Discord guys, you can do whatever you want. Like this group is for you. Use as you wish. For the group and the critique of the exercise of the class, unfortunately, no. Like the idea is that we're gonna be going through these exercises together, and we're gonna be kind of discussing the topics there. Oh, the eye, nose, chin triangles. I don't think I've seen a lot of resources on that. I think some of these I kind of probably saw in one of the classes I took, and then I tried to find these triangles myself as well. It's just about relationships, so you can even trace here from ear to eyes and eyes to beard. I think it's a little bit arbitrary, but this idea of the triangles, like from corners of the eyes to the nose, it's probably on one of these classical books. I'm not sure if, yeah, to be honest, I don't recall exactly where this one comes from, but I'm pretty sure I've seen this in multiple times, multiple places. But it's mainly about relationships, right? It's about doing comparative measurement between the parts of the face and the angles that we see. Which brand Pomodoro time was at? I honestly don't know. I bought this on Amazon, maybe like $10 or something. It's pretty cool though. It's like a little digital clock, rechargeable battery. So I've been using this constantly. Awesome. Thank you. Yes, Felix. There you go. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Awesome. Great to hear. What point is the deadline for posting model critique group? Okay, so deadline is, well, I want to say Friday night, but if I say that, everybody's going to post Friday night, and then I won't be able to review all of the content before the next class. So try to post as soon as you have something. The idea there is that next week we're going to be discussing a different exercise, so I don't want to be overlapping things way too much, right? So my goal is to have everything critiqued at the Sunday. So in order to do that, you gotta post at least like Thursday, Friday. But I'm not gonna impose anyone to post. So like, let's say like Friday afternoon, that's the deadline. But if everybody posts Friday afternoon, you may not get a critique until the next class, and it may take me Sunday next week to kind of get you back on track, right? But yeah, post as you go. Awesome. Thanks everybody. That was great. Looks like we got. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate, again, thanks for joining. For those of you who are returning, I really appreciate the confidence. And it's been a blast for me. It's an honor to be with you all. And thank you so much. We're going to have a blast. We have 3 more weeks, 3 more classes. I think today was somewhat the lighter one. We're going to dive into so much fun stuff moving forward. So stay tuned, do exercises, do studies, share with each other, bond, and, do all of the fun stuff. And let's get together and do some art. All right. Take it easy, y'all. See you next time. Cheers.